Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We've got hand tracking with built-in microphones. We've got tablets in front of us that show us the notes and comments so we can interact with our audience live. Hello to everyone, all our regular viewers, our time travelers, place travelers, wherever you are in the world, watching us on 2x speed sometimes. I'm sorry if that's your experience, but thank you for watching us anyways. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, you can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed out on our website. So thank you sincerely to our patrons, including XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, Richard Meller, Parmesan Cubits, Steve Lucas, and David Wyatt. Hello to everyone in our comments. It seems like we've got some viewers that are going to be popping in and out over the course of this show since we've gone live right as Skynet comes online. So, David, what do we have today?
Yeah, so we are going live just before OpenAI is expected to announce GPT-5, so I'm sure some people will be watching that as well at the same time. Apologies, folks, for us being slightly delayed today, but it is, again, almost a meme at this point that Meta loves to drop news just before you go live. In this case, some very meaty details about that ultra-wide field of view yet practical form factor headset that we are going to be trying next week. As well as the other headset they're demoing next week at this conference, SIGGRAPH, which is a ultra high resolution, high brightness, and high contrast headset. So we will be talking about that today. That's topic 11 on our list, Boba 3 and Tiramisu. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the article just went live on uploadvr.com, so you can read about that. And it's some very interesting stuff. Very excited to try that next week. And that will, of course, be the primary focus of next week's VR download. This week, we have a total of 13 topics. The starting topics are quite short, just things we want to bring to your attention, but we're not going to have large, long discussions about. And then we'll get into some really meaty stuff at the end, including those prototypes, some other interesting research, and Google's Genie 3, Google DeepMind's Genie 3 AI world model, and what that might mean for the entire future of computer graphics and photorealistic interactive VR. So we really have some very interesting topics today. We'll start by talking about Elysian, the first WebXR game to come to Quest Horizon Store. We'll then discuss the Instagram app on Quest, AI converting all videos to 3D now. You can scroll reels in 3D on Instagram. We will then talk about Horizon Worlds being now kind of integrated into Instagram and Facebook. You can click a link into a Horizon World while on Instagram or Facebook and just instantly be put into it without even leaving the app. Then we have two stories about 360 video. Firstly, the DJI, the big drone company, the kind of company that almost has a monopoly on drones, has launched a 360 camera for consumers. It's $550 and it's better in some interesting ways compared to the Insta360 camera out there. We're also going to talk about a 3D 360 production from Red Bull and Meta, touching the sky. There's been a lot of focus in recent years on 180 degree 3D, but 360 3D is kind of fallen out of the zeitgeist, and I think Red Bull and Meta have kind of made an argument for why it should actually be in the conversation and should be focused on just as much. We will then discuss some quotes from Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook. Zuckerberg claiming that people without smart glasses in the future will be at a cognitive disadvantage, while Tim Cook says that Apple continues to be very focused on visionOS despite the public perception of that. Then we'll touch on 4 areas of research. One is a technique called You Only Render Once, YORO, that increases VR frame rates by rendering one eye, like usual, but then synthesizing the other eye. And we'll talk about how that could be important for standalone VR's frame rate. We will talk about Meta getting 3 full-body codec avatars running in real time on Quest 3. After last week, we had some snarky comments from people saying, "Oh, all this just works in a high-end PC." Well, Meta is showing 3 of them running in real time on Quest 3, but we'll also go into the trade-offs there and why there's still kind of a while to go yet until we expect to see that ship in a product. We'll then be talking about some interesting Google research that Ian picked up on, which is about how proxies could be the key to interacting with physical objects in mixed reality. So small proxy versions of physical objects that are at a close distance for more precise interaction. And then we will talk about Boba 3 and Tiramisu, Meta's ultra-wide field of view and hyperrealistic VR prototype headsets that I will be trying next week. Meta has just dumped a bunch of information about them. We knew about their existence, right? We talked about it a few weeks ago, but now Meta's really gone into specific details. We will then be finishing up the show with 2 AI stories. One is that the Horizon Worlds desktop editor now has something called Creator Assistant, which is an AI agent that can automate development. So we're not just talking about you typing in a model or a texture or a sound file that you want to generate. We're talking about telling the agent the specific thing you want to set up and it interacting with the editor to do it. So that's picking the right model, placing it down, adding a script to it, changing its rotation and size, all of those kind of aspects, and what that may say about the future of VR development in general. And finally, we will talk about Genie 3, Google DeepMind's breathtaking, groundbreaking AI world model that really opens up some fundamental questions about what is the future of rendering, what is the most viable path to photorealistic interactive VR. Some of the most truly groundbreaking research I've ever seen in my lifetime. So this is going to be an interesting discussion.
Looks like we got some VR developers out there in our audience watching us today, and I know there's a lot of silent, quiet viewers out there. As always, we love hearing where you're watching us from in the world. We had a viewer watch us from Antarctica, which was kind of mind-blowing, which was a really, really neat moment for us. And I now have it in the back of my mind. I want to hear about an astronaut watching us, and I think it'll happen. I think it'll happen sooner or later. And I'm seeing everyone out there. We've got Caleb of New York City, F. Meister, Arlen, a regular viewer out there. Always love seeing Arlen out there. I see Geek Odin out there, the Creator Virtual Desktop, as well as Not Suspicious, with some cool apps from all of them. So thank you for tuning in today. Yeah, let's move through some of these things. I think some of those last subjects we're going to get into deep, so we should probably move through these first few pretty quickly.
Yeah, so Elysian is the first WebXR game available on Quest's Meta Horizon store. So we've talked about how this is possible before, that since Connect 2024 last year, Meta lets developers package their WebXR sites as APKs and distribute them on the Horizon store. Now, this doesn't mean that this is instead of being on the web. This game, Elysian, is still available at a simple web URL. You can go in. It actually works on flat screen or VR, so you can open your web browser on your phone, your PC, your headset, and type a URL and go there. That's not going away. This is not taking away from that. It's a secondary way to get the app where you can just find it on the Horizon store. And because it's a WebXR app, where a lot of the kind of engine code is built into the web browser, it's tiny. It's 8 megabytes. So you had this really interesting experience when you download and install this, that it's essentially instant. Maybe if anyone in the comments has like a multi-gigabit connection, you may find that for almost everything. But even then, there will be a small install time. The experience here of being able to click install and open in pretty much less than 3 seconds is quite interesting and shows a real advantage of WebXR. So this isn't making use of the in-app payment system that we discussed, but in theory it could. If the developer doesn't currently monetize this, it's a free game. It's free in the sense that it's free to acquire and does not have in-app payments, but the developer could. But yeah, this is just notable because it's an interesting example of how if you are a WebXR developer and you want to get more people in your experience, here's a way to do that.
Mm-hmm. And this next one was one I spotted. This was we've got a couple here back to back that are, I don't know. show the tendrils of Horizon reaching into all of Meta's existing products in pretty significant ways. You want to run through these, or is there more on this subject we want to go through first?
No, I think we've said enough on that. Like I said, it's a viable way for WebXR developers to get more reach. Let's talk about this next story, which is about the Instagram app on Quest. So there has been an Instagram app on Quest for many months now, and it's actually one of the best made 2D apps. It feels very visionOS like. Definitely copies some ideas from visionOS. It has this kind of background pass-through blur frosted glass effect that almost no other app has. I'm not sure if it's something they did custom or if it's a test of something they're going to roll out to all developers. The point I'm trying to make about the Instagram app in general is that it's great. The Instagram app on Quest, it's rare to see Meta put out an app with this quality, to be frank. And one of the really cool things is if you are an Instagram user and you're used to the Explore page, instead of just scrolling up and down, it's actually left, right as well. So you're kind of going around an infinite grid of Explore, which is either interesting or terrifying, depending on your personal relationship with Instagram. But the news here is that now AI converts all videos, so that's Reels, Instagram Reels, to 3D. It already a few months ago, Meta started doing this for photos, but now it is the case for videos too. So if it has already ever been done once, it seems to be done server side. So if it's been done once, it'll be instantaneous when you open the video. It's already in 3D. If it hasn't been done before, you'll see a little spinner that lasts, depending on the video, anywhere between maybe 3 to 5 to most I've ever seen was about 10 seconds. And then for everyone in the future, it will be instant that it's in 3D. The quality here is surprisingly great. The only artifacts I ever saw were in very low quality videos. And if you're not an Instagram user, people sometimes post intentionally low quality memes as like a joke. That's the only time I've seen it kind of trip up, when they're purposely, over compressed to have a kind of funny aesthetic. Otherwise, it seems to look remarkably similar to a spatial video captured on an iPhone. And so Ian and I had a discussion about this, and we'll get into the nuances here. When you capture spatial video or spatial photo on an iPhone, it is true stereo 3D. These are two real images, but they have a very narrow interaxial distance. The distance between your two iPhone cameras on the back is about 19 millimeters. And compare that to your IPD, which you may know as a VR user. If you don't, it's going to be somewhere between 55 and 75 millimeters. You can see that there's a lot less stereo disparity there for your iPhone camera versus your eyes. So professional 3D cameras, they are obviously 63, 65 millimeters. If you were to do that with a phone, you would have to have one lens on top and one lens on the bottom. And I think Apple just isn't willing to have that kind of aesthetic trade-off. The point I'm trying to make here is that when I tested out the quality here, it makes me question how needed the real stereo 3D, but with small interaxial distance smartphone cameras have. Is it really necessary? It seems that taking a regular smartphone video and doing AI view synthesis to get synthesized 3D is pretty much as good, with maybe 90% as good. Now, that's not to say, and Ian would want me to point this out, I'm sure, that this is the case for professional cameras. If you have a professional camera with a 65 millimeter interaxial distance, two lenses spaced apart, then currently that still has a more pronounced sense of 3D without the artifacts of AI synthesis. Though again, the artifacts are remarkably minor. It really is pretty crazy how well this works. If you have a Quest, I recommend trying it out and seeing for yourself. I wonder here, when it comes to the long term, AI view synthesis is going to get better over time, just as everything in generative AI is, as we'll talk about later. Do we eventually get to a point where there's not really a need for 3D cameras at all, and that regular 2D captures can be converted? Could this be the case for 180 and 360, as has been done? Even Apple did a kind of synthesized 3D for their little F1 experience that brings you around a lap with Brad Pitt. So not yet is the answer, but how many years off are we from even professional 3D cameras being unnecessary, I wonder? Or will it maybe never happen? Are there fundamental limits there?
Yeah, there's so many ways to think about this, and one of the things that we kind of, I don't know, barely touch on this show, but there is a look to a lot of this generated content, and what one of the things we struggle against is like we could talk about this, like it's going to take a year for us to figure out what the look of the latest generation of content actually looks like. Oh, that piece was generated by this engine, or this piece was generated by that engine. You only can really do that after, I don't know, looking at some of these outputs for a couple months to kind of get this. Oh, it all has kind of a look to it. It all has a production style. And if you're wanting, all to say is like recording a selfie of two people at an event that you set through Instagram's filter is a very different thing from trying to hold everyone's attention for 2 hours like Apple is trying to do with some of its movies.
Yeah, for sure. Once you start to get into exotic circumstances, I'm sure you may see more artifacts. I did try to play with this for like an hour or so. And again, I'm very impressed. I think a lot of people who do have this kind of feeling of, oh, there is a look to it, may have tried the model of a year ago. But as I'll keep stressing in this episode, as we talk more about AI, the pace of progress in generative AI is such that a year ago might as well be a decade ago for hardware. It's like saying that you tried VR, but you tried a Gear VR, compared to a Quest 3 or an Apple Vision Pro. The pace, what happens in months in AI, in other fields takes years. So this is the difficulty here, where uh, you really have to recognize that if you haven't tried something from the past few months, it's probably very outdated by modern standards.
Yeah, I don't want to go too off track here, but I keep thinking hardware-wise about this distance between the two lenses issue that you keep discussing, and you pointed out how on other phone designs it looks really ugly to try to spread out those lenses the proper distance. And I'm sitting here going, how do we solve this? Is it worth closing the gap? Is I guess what you're asking. Like, is it possible for Steph to have a flip out second eyeball that you could flip out from the side of the camera, like I don't know, you flip your wrist and the second eyeball pops out. You take your picture in 3D and then you flip your eyeball back into your handset so you get the proper distance between the two lenses. But yeah, this points out the user interface issue where you got to hand hold it somewhere and you've got to keep those fingers from covering up the lenses, and you want to keep the distance between the lenses about the distance between the lenses of a human, between the eyeballs of a human face. And all those things are like, how does that fit into the next few years of Apple design, if they're going to be the seller of the highest, most cameras in the world, right, on all their iPhones. This is the thing I have to say this once for all. The whole like island thing on the front of Apple iPhones. I'm wondering what happens if they can make the camera invisible underneath the surface of the display. It feels like that unlocks Predator technology, where you can use the back cameras to show what the back cameras see to the front side, thus making the display of the phone invisible, thus giving you an AR glass, liquid glass interface on future iPhones by taking what's seen by the back cameras and projecting it through the front display in real time, exactly like the R1 chip does for Vision Pro, right? Like this thing that processes our reality for us in Vision Pro, I feel like could be applied to the same concept. If all it has to happen here is the dynamic island on the front of an iPhone has to go invisible to enable this. How does that? That seems like a really far out idea and an impossible hardware thing. I don't know if it ever happened. How does that idea compete with the two lenses situation?
Yeah, so it's not impossible what you're suggesting. You would want to have a much greater spacing, realistically, maybe taking the lens all the way down here. There's a practical ergonomics problem with a phone, which is that you're holding it. So if you can't see where the camera lenses are, you're going to smudge your fingers all over them or even cover them. And that's going to kill the effect because you're not going to see through the phone. You're going to see giant magnified smudges of your fingers. So
Well,
it's also not as important, right? I don't think people need their phone to be transparent. We're obviously in a Vision Pro or Quest 3. It matters to see the real world. Your phone blocks out maybe 10 degrees of your field of vision. It's not a big deal, whereas obviously in a headset, it's more important. But I just want to note here that this is X-Real Beam Pro, which is like a phone-like device that does let you have a wider stereo interaxial distance, but even this is only 50 millimeters, so it would actually need to be even wider. Realistically, you would need to have it kind of so far down that it would interfere with how you hold the phone, and that's the kind of issue here. That like, it's how do you do this in a device you hold, and that's why it's so interesting to think that maybe AI view synthesis evolves so fast that it's not necessary. Maybe 3 years down the line, Apple says, we're actually no longer even going to bother doing a hardware level capture. And that gives them more freedom of how they position their lenses for other purposes like regular photography.
To your point, I mean, I don't know if it's coming up later, but since the spatial scenes in Vision OS similar to what you're describing is done? I can't remember if you said that already, but
Sure, yeah. So spatial scenes on visionOS 26 actually goes much further. So what we're talking about here with Instagram is just view synthesis. So it's just taking where the left eye would be as the real image, and then synthesizing what would the view be from the right eye, and you get a regular stereoscopic image, but it's not sixed off, it's not volumetric, it's stereo. And we talk all the time on this show about kind of the difference. The spatial scenes thing, I don't have an image on me right now, but in visionOS 26, it goes much further. It is kind of a much more advanced neural algorithm that analyzes the scene and kind of builds a depth map that's much more detailed and tries to then reconstruct it as a volumetric sixed off scene. And I think it's shown up here. So it's likely using Gaussian splatting, though Apple hasn't gone into detail. And it was, to be honest, joint most remarkable feature of visionOS 26 for me in my time with it compared to the personas. The personas are great, and they're joint number one, but spatial scenes is too. Spatial scenes is so good that it's stunning, and no one else is doing this as far as I know on device. I don't know any other XR system that does anything like this on device. And to be clear, for people wondering, this is from a regular 2D image. So visionOS 2 that's already shipped stable on Vision Pro since last year has let you convert your 2D photos to stereo 3D. This is the next generation of that. It's turning a still image into a kind of limited field, but still truly volumetric scene that you can kind of lean around. You can also do this in like web pages. So I was in Safari and I was on this website that was like showing a review of dinner, like fruit and different meals. And you could then just instantly turn it into a spatial scene and have it as if it was kind of floating there in front of you. All of this just goes to show the pace of all of these AI technologies is just changing the technology industry and the wider world so quickly that it's almost hard to keep up with the pace. And I see a commenter here, Jack B, saying that they keep redoing their AI remastered videos because every 6 months, some new model comes along that just performs so much better that it makes the old one look like trash. And that is just going to be a trend we see in coming years. The world is going to change rapidly.
Yeah,
this technology.
I guess I'll take this moment to recommend any experts in the space out there reach out to David Heaney, send him an email, because I'll make the argument here that he's actually one of the web's great resources in processing and understanding the overall direction of this technology. He's worked really hard to understand everything that's happening in this space and why this progress is progressing the way it is, why it feels the way it is, the differences. So you can reach out to him and really help us and our audience break down for everyone how AI is affecting VR, mixed reality, all the way down. And we're going to be covering some of that later on in the show. We should talk about this next Horizon Worlds now being accessed, right?
Yeah, just one last thing I want to point out that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering right now. Okay, that's cool that it does it for Instagram, but what about my own images? What about my own videos? So as I just mentioned, Apple Vision Pro lets you already today turn your own images 3D on visionOS 2 or sixed off on visionOS 26. There is evidence from Luna, who data mines Quest Horizon OS, that Meta is working on the ability to turn your own images into 3D. I should point out that ByteDance Pico headsets already do this. Again, I'm only talking about images, not videos, but it is the case that on these other headsets you can do it. It will probably come to Quest soon enough. I would be surprised if it wasn't an announcement at Connect 2025 next month. But yeah, that's for your local media. It's probably coming soon. But as you say, Ian, yes, let's move on to talk about that Horizon Worlds mobile news. We don't want to get too much into this because it's mobile, but I think it's notable because of how much money Meta is throwing at this and kind of how much effort. So we've all seen that legendary misadventure leaked memo where Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, says that Horizon Worlds absolutely has to break out on mobile this year for their plans to make sense. Well, they essentially want it to be, the next Roblox, the next Rec Room, the next Minecraft. But that's a long way off, of course. If you were Meta, what would you do to try and make that more likely? You would leverage your strengths. One of those strengths is that you own Instagram and Facebook, which have almost 4 billion monthly active users. So now in Instagram or Facebook, if someone shares a link to Horizon World, you can click it and open it directly in the app, even if you don't have Meta Horizon installed. It's also the case that they've upgraded the camera features in Horizon Worlds for mobile to no longer show the UI and mute all other players. And for all camera, whether it's mobile or VR, if you're using that third-person camera in Horizon Worlds, we've talked recently a lot about third-person VR camera tools. Horizons is pretty good. You can share it directly to Instagram or Facebook, and it will have like a little badge with a link to the world. So you're sharing footage of something, and anyone on your story can click it, and on their phone, on their laptop, whatever, instantly join that world. So obvious move from Meta. It makes sense. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone that happens. The other thing is that we should note that this happens as they've now given out a total of $2 million in prizes to the creators of mobile-focused Horizon Worlds. That is a lot of money. It will obviously raise eyebrows for certain VR developers that wish that money went into VR. But it's notable that you can see what Meta is doing here. It's pushing with all its resources, using its social network, using its war chest to try and make Horizon Worlds on mobile a thing.
Fetch. Fetch is what comes to mind. David said it. I huffed. Is it going to be a thing, right? Are those people who are using Instagram suddenly dropped into a world that they can navigate with their fingers going to be using Instagram more? Are they going to find a path to a VR headset from there? What is the end game of that? Are they going to be actually a little put off by the low quality mobile game that they just got dropped into by a random link on their Instagram? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Good luck to anyone who's creating. Also, just the dollar amounts, as you pointed out, these are significant chunks being thrown at creators of these mobile apps. So this is if you're looking for a way to make money in this space right now, one way to do it is to try to find one of these basic rewards that Meta is handing out for the development of a mobile game, and try to get that reward. And that's very difficult to hear. That's I'm not saying that that's a recommended path, right? We're speaking to an audience of developers who have had a very straightforward, I'm going to give a chunk of my money to my publisher. I'm going to give a chunk of my money to the platform company, and the rest of my money is coming to me, and I'm going to sell it for a price, and that's going to be my relationship to users. And this is what Meta is currently pushing.
Yeah, some of those prizes are really strange as well. They had the obvious genre prizes of like $100,000, but there were some where they were giving out like $20,000 for like most memeable moment and like best UI. There were so many prizes here. It was 5 genre categories and then like 15 micro prizes for all these kind of things. You can go and read about it on our article online and see the kind of money being thrown out here. But these prizes were $100,000, $50,000, $20,000 to, I think, in total 50 creators, and then that sums up to $2 million. Now, in the wider context, Meta has sorry, go ahead. You're somehow muted, but I don't know how you've muted yourself.
Am I here now?
Yeah.
David respectfully recognized that I did. He saw me hit the button, so I wasn't muted here.
I think you hit it.
I wasn't.
Somehow.
Yeah, no, I did it too quick. I did it too
kind
quick.
Of fiddling with it.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. Now I've lost my train of thought. I think what we're both going to say is that Meta has other partnerships and other programs where they're funding developers in a lot of other routes. The thing I was going to push back on, or I just wanted to introduce to this conversation, is yes, that exists. Yes, they're funding their own projects. However, what is the scale of these investments compared to the past? And do they still fund, like non-exclusive third-party games for the MetaQuest ecosystem that does it have to be exclusive? What is the period of exclusivity? What is the scale of investment compared to the numbers you just threw out? One of the things I wonder whether they're taking investments in some of the companies that are performing the best on the Quest ecosystem. So if any devs out there have taken investments from Meta and have a good placement on the store, I think that's something that should be enunciated and known more by more people so that you understand the relationship there. The like, I would like to understand the relationships there. So that's just a question I have going out there. I wanted to just put out what are the relationships between some of the highest performing Quest stores and Meta's investments.
Yeah, I'd certainly like to know more details about what is Meta still investing in. So, the company claims that it invested in 400 VR and mixed reality titles that shipped in 2024, and that it's currently investing in 200 in active development. But those numbers cloud what exactly are those titles? When maybe 5 years ago, these would all be the kind of core VR games that we all know and love in this audience. Are some of these now, a mixed reality cooking app? What are we talking about here? And how many of these are, Horizon Worlds things, for example? That 2 million fund for mobile worlds is as part of a larger 50 million fund for VR and mobile worlds as well. And they kind of give them out based on engagement and user satisfaction and how many minutes people spend and things like that. So we know the numbers for Horizon Worlds. They're very open about that, but they're not open at all about what are the numbers for traditional VR titles. They used to be in the past, right? Like if you've been in this industry for a while, you'll remember the 500 million that Mark Zuckerberg invested in VR gaming in the Oculus Rift era, $500 million. And they were very public about that. But how does that compare to today? What are those numbers? We don't know. I mean, to be fair, one balance I do want to bring here is it's still clear that Meta is massively investing in VR gaming, right? It shipped Asgard's Wrath to a AAA 60R RPG in 2023. It shipped Batman Arkham Shadow, a AAA Batman game last year. It just announced Marvel Deadpool VR, which looks to be kind of blockbuster. It's a Deadpool game, right? We are still talking about the company that seems, I can't think of any other company that does invest more in VR gaming. So we do want to put that context there. When's the last time that Valve shipped a game? 5 years ago. When's the last time that Sony shipped a first-party blockbuster for PlayStation VR 2? At launch. We do want to put that into context. At the same time, it is very important for developers who are basing their business, their livelihood around what Meta prioritizes and invests in to know what Meta is doing. And it doesn't mean they're entitled. It doesn't mean that they are demanding anything, but they need to have this information to plan the future of their business.
Yeah. We've got a lot of folks from the industry watching us, so thank you for tuning in. And we totally understand that there's lots of different teams at Meta, and there's lots of different teams at every different company. One of the things, I'm speaking for devs out there who have been working more than a decade in VR, right? And they have gone through 4 or 5, maybe even 6 classes of Meta employee over the time span of 12 years or 10 years from 2014 to now, of just people to contact that's inside Meta. And, there's a few people that would have survived outside from the Meta transition to now of still being there. But that's been the experience for a large segment of the dev context that I've been out there with is just a revolving door over a decade plus of who to contact inside Meta to get your program even looked at or considered, or right. Like it's this is just this is not a one-time experience that I've heard from the dev community. And so, like, what that says is what we've noticed is Meta tends to talk about the things that they're funding the most and what they believe in the most, and they tend to just, amplify themselves to an extraordinary degree. And I'm just having to speak up for these other experiences and saying, it's actually been really, really, really rough as a dev out there having to try to find funding for your project. And now, especially with the Horizon push just continuing to this degree, I'm hearing the struggle turning into panic almost among some devs out there trying to get that money to push them over the just to get the game out there. Not just that, but what kind of assurance can they have that there's an audience on the other side of that if it's just slop after slop after slop being promoted before their project?
Yeah, some very, very interesting thoughts there. One thing I do want to note is not all of these Horizon mobile games are terrible. I have no interest in them myself on a personal level, but I obviously did load a few up for for professional curiosity to see what are we talking about here. Some of these are pretty decent games. But there are other decent games on the App Store and Play Store and on Roblox and in other kind of creator platforms like Rec Room. There's nothing here that stands out as this is uniquely special, but it's not all slop, especially considering I'm talking about the stuff that was awarded money for being the best. I'm sure a lot of it is slop. I'm referring only to the awarded stuff. Are we ready to talk about 360 videos now?
Yeah, let's get into this. You've got, what, 2 stories here on 360 video? Let's just run through those.
Yeah. So the first is just the DJI, the company you almost certainly know as being essentially the global monopoly on consumer drones, the Chinese tech giant. They have now entered the 360 video camera market, the consumer 360 video camera. So you'll know that we've been covering Insta360, another Chinese company that has been at the forefront here for a while. Earlier this year launched their X5, which has 8K 360 video capture at $550. And of course, a lot of people are going to note this is only 2D. It's not 3D. There's one 180-degree camera on each side, right? You can see that. All of the cameras we're talking about here are that, but they're also affordable for consumers. These are $550 cameras that you can get and very easily capture your own 360 videos that you can go watch in your headset. And that's very cool. And I get a lot of people messaging me saying how much they enjoy being able to do that. And at 8K, which we'll talk soon about what that means in practice from angular resolution. But Insta360's X5 is able to record 8K at 30 FPS, and DJI has come out at the same price with 8K at 50 FPS. So that is greater motion clarity. Both cameras, you can decrease the resolution and up the frame rate, right? You can do like 5.7K at 60 or 4K at 100. But in general, you're going to want to go the highest resolution, even when there is a loss to motion clarity. And the reason for that is that 8K sounds like a lot, but when it's spread over 360 degrees of your field of view, it's actually not. It's the angular resolution there is still not the same as what you would get from your headset at peak. And so this kind of will get into the discussion we'll have in a second about the trade-offs of 180 degree and 360, but 8K 180 this will sound obvious to some people, but I just want to make sure I spell it out, have twice the angular resolution as 8K 360. So you shave off half of the field of view, right? When you look to the side, you will see black bars on the side of the rear kind of area of the sphere, but you'll get double the angular resolution. I'll talk about that more when we talk about Red Bull and Meta's presentation. But I think what's interesting also about the DJI's camera is it has larger sensors, wider lens aperture, lets in more light, and it has this interesting little accessory that is like a handle with a built-in battery so that it can record for a lot longer. I think it like triples the effective battery life. So this is kind of the most appealing 360 consumer camera yet. I want to see these companies get to 8K 90 FPS. 50 FPS is still not great motion clarity, especially if you're moving the camera. I recommend when you're recording 360 video, just keep it still unless you're doing some cool sport like wing gliding, as we'll talk about in a second. But in general, if you can't get the high motion clarity, you want to do that. But yeah, interesting camera. But let's talk about some 3D 360 now, if I can find it. So Red Bull and Meta have spent 3 years building out this 1 hour long documentary experience, and it is called Touching the Sky. So it involves all kind of human powered flight, like paragliding, wingsuit stuff, sort of all kind of wing jumps and things like that. It's interesting. It's best in class for 360 3D. This is not being recorded on a $550 camera. This is orders of magnitude more expensive, to be clear. You do get a real sense of 3D. This isn't synthesized 3D. And it shows that I think in the industry we have forgotten how immersive 360 video can be. In recent years, Apple has obviously brought 180-degree 3D back to the forefront of the zeitgeist with Apple Immersive Video. It's high resolution. It's 8K and 180, so it's double the resolution of this. But for me, as great as it is, and as much as I love immersive video, and as much as it makes sense for situations where you never need to really look to the side or behind much, like sports when you're just looking at the pitch or something like that, or say you were recording a theater production, you're not looking to the audience. Any situation where you get this feeling of, wow, I'm really there. This really feels like I'm in this other place. As soon as you turn your head to the side, you will see that large blacked out area of the rear 180-degree of your field of view. And to be clear, I don't mean looking behind you. Most people, even when they're watching a 360 video, will never actually look behind them. I'm talking about just turning to the side. Because if you turn to the side, you can easily see where that 180-degree ends. I've actually argued for years that the industry probably should have just picked 270 degrees as a kind of trade-off, so that when you turn to the side, you're still seeing content to your side, but you get a higher angular resolution than 360. However, we are where we are. The reason I think you should try Touching the Sky if you have a Quest headset is to feel just how much more immersive 360 can feel. Every direction you turn, there is content. And in fact, Red Bull and Meta lean into this so much that they recommend a spinning chair. And it's not a recommendation, it's a requirement, because they have the focus of the content, even the text that they show, appear all around you. You could theoretically just keep recentering all the time, but even then, you would have to kind of turn your head and recenter. This needs to be watched with a spinning chair. It is meant to be experienced in true 360. I think it makes a very convincing argument for 360. Is it as sharp as 180 degree? No, it's not. It's half as sharp by definition. But it's still interesting, and I'd love to see what happens when we get 16K 360 video out there. I think that could be great.
Fascinating stuff to consider. And we're going to need to work on our camera expertise over time as these things roll out each new layer of like improvement. I've taken some incredible videos with the Meta glasses, except that's 2D, and it's a weird aspect ratio than we're used to. It's not an aspect ratio we're used to with this 16:9 landscape format, or even some of the vertical formats. It's very different. But also I want it 3D, and I want it stabilized so that if I turn my head or do little movements, it doesn't affect or destroy the overall look of the thing. And how does all that work? Where does AI fit into sort of auto stabilization of your head movements when we talk about these formats over time is going to be fascinating. Like I don't know how we account for all of those things I just mentioned.
Yeah, you could imagine a crazy setup where the glasses have 180-degree lenses and they're only cropping out of parts so that even as you turn, it's kind of keeping it stabilized. They're all kind of things you can imagine there. But yeah, I think for the majority of capture, especially for 180, you're not going to do it from glasses. You're going to want to have a camera that you can put on a tripod. For that DJI one, they have all kinds of attachments for putting it on like a motorbike helmet and I think surfboards and all kinds of things, just like Insta360 offers that. And just for like a few commenters I see being like, wow, 8K, just want to be clear again. 8K over 100, over 360 degrees is a lower angular resolution than your Quest 3. So, angular resolution will decrease the wider the field of view given the same resolution. And that's very important to understand. That's why, even though this is 8K 360 3D, it's still not sharp. It does not have a sharp look. It's soft image. They have increased their bitrate, it does seem, on MetaQuest TV, especially if you go to the little settings icon and go to best. I highly recommend you do that. Don't let auto lower it for you. And yeah, if you have a Quest, go and try this out. It's free on the MetaQuest TV app. You can find the MetaQuest TV app in your library. I'm pretty sure this comes up as like the featured video. It's not hard to find once you're in the MetaQuest TV app.
I saw some comments saying that user-generated content is being moved around to different places inside the MetaQuest ecosystem. Have to verify that, but it makes sense.
Yeah, so they're getting rid of it on MetaQuest TV. I think they're kind of refocusing on professional stuff like this, because we've talked about this before. 360 and 180 degree video, if it's low quality and it's your own moments, your own memories, your own holiday, your own family, that's great. But nobody else wants to see low quality 3D. There's not low quality 3D, quality 360 and 180. They don't want to see low quality 360 or low quality 180. So there needs to be a curation there. And it's interesting that Meta says, just go put it on YouTube, which that's literally what they said in their statement to people who put things up on there.
So I love our comment here, basically telling us to get to the good stuff, and that's how most people feel about 360 video in general, which is really unfortunate to the artists out there that are trying to break through and do some breakthrough stuff on the highest end abilities. But yeah, it's hard out there, and so let's move on. But we understand both those perspectives pretty deeply here.
Just want to finish by saying, I think 360 is still not there yet. It's still, for 3D, it needs 16K probably. 180 is at the point where with 8K, it's good enough for events and things like that. 360, we're going to need another doubling there for the obvious reason. But yeah, let's move on to our next topic. These two topics actually are quotes from the various executives of Meta, the various CEOs of Meta and Apple. The first is from Mark Zuckerberg. And Zuckerberg claims that in the future, people without smart glasses will be at a cognitive disadvantage in the same way that people who have impaired vision and don't have either glasses or contacts, or these days laser eye surgery, are at a visual disadvantage. So that's his claim, that if you don't have a kind of AI with first-person view that can speak into your ears at any time without having to take something out of your pocket, you'll be at a cognitive disadvantage against the people you're working with or competing against.
My super eyes are equivalent to your regular eyes is not a solid argument, right? Like someone who's restoring their vision to 2020 is not the same as someone who is pulling up every fact about you while looking at you and then using it against you to pressure you into a point of view that isn't yours.
Well, sure, that's a negative usage of it, but to take the devil's advocate, you can use the internet to do horrible things. You can use smartphones and laptops to do horrible. You could look someone up and find all these details. This changes the convenience of that. This changes the convenience of the good and the bad. It's a trend that we've seen over time. So, before the internet, when people wanted to learn about something that they didn't know about, they had to go to an encyclopedia or a library and look it up. Then the internet came along, and you could argue that people who chose to not adopt the internet and think, I don't want this, not have Google and Wikipedia and things like that, were at a cognitive disadvantage because it took them longer to access information. People could now make the argument, and I'm only presenting the argument, I'm not saying this is true and valid, but people can have their own take, that if you have an AI that you can ask about anything at any time, you've brought up nefarious purposes, but of course there are many normal and completely benign purposes you may want to do so, could also be at a cognitive disadvantage. The need to pull out your phone and type, or even bring up an AI app and take a picture, compared to just saying, hey Meta, what is this? And you can imagine when you get that EMG wristband, you don't even need the hey meta step, right? You could have a finger gesture that means that. I'm going to just come up with one here. It could be like pinching your three fingers like that. And while you're holding them together, you say, what is this? And you release it. And it's kind of like a push to talk for the AI. I would be surprised if Meta doesn't have something like that for the EMG wristband. And it'll instantly respond. And I've seen this myself sometimes in using even the Ray-Ban Meta glasses of today with their kind of relatively basic multimodal AI. If I come across something in the world that I don't know what it is, or I have a question while I'm on a walk and something I would normally Google, I can ask the AI and it'll respond in 2 seconds. You can see where his argument is, though, of course, we have to bring in the valid perspective that smart glasses salesman says that people without smart glasses will be a cognitive disadvantage. He has a huge incentive to say this. It's like, the people who sell you milk saying that not having milk is bad for you. It's a obvious conflict of interest. But I think the point he's getting at, there is truth to it.
It's yeah. I mean, it's like saying a person who has a calculator and another person standing right next to him who doesn't have a calculator, right? One person has a bicycle and the other person doesn't have a bicycle. I've got a tool and you don't have a tool. Therefore, I'm at a cognitive advantage. And it's just a self-fulfilling argument that Zuckerberg makes again and again, that Facebook makes again and again, that you kind of need us. You need us. You must need us. You're going to have to need us, and you're never going to not need us. And the argument here is just so very let me frame it a little bit differently. You will be at a cognitive disadvantage from the police and military of your native country, who have access to all of the data stores for every citizen of your country and can overlay it upon your face as you're walking around the real world. Now, that's not a nefarious nor a positive use. That is a fact of use of these technologies that will come to pass if they haven't already in certain parts of the world. So that's the same. All I'm saying is that's the same thing he is saying. You are at a cognitive disadvantage compared to police and militaries who can overlay every fact about you on top of you as they approach you. So all prior crimes, inclinations, all those things that you've put out on social media are potentially applicable. And that is what he is saying is your cognitive disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. You could argue then that if you have smart glasses, say 5 years from now, you're pulled over by the police and it happens to be an officer who is trying to do something that is outside the law. Maybe they are the thing they're arresting you for isn't valid, or the law that they're citing isn't applicable in this case. Your smart glasses could put a prompt in your field of vision saying, actually cite this to this officer, or could even recommend, don't speak right now, stop speaking. What you're saying is going to put you in legal jeopardy. It's with all technologies, it's a game of cat and mouse. One gets it, the other side gets it. There's kind of measures and countermeasures.
A little alert on your holographic glasses in the corner. It just says, "You are breaking the law. You are breaking the law," with little red lines in the corner, alerting you as you go. I don't think that's going to happen, but
no,
I mean, image.
I'm saying it would help you. It would help you minimize your legal liability or make sure that you're doing the right thing. Like as if you had I think was it one of our audience members last week that said it's going to be as if you have 140 IQ friend helping you throughout your life. Or you can come up with whatever arbitrary figure you want there. In this case, if you're being arrested for something or interacting with the police, it'll be as if you have a 140 IQ lawyer in your head telling you what to do to minimize your likelihood of being arrested for whatever you may be being accused of. They will have their own AI, of course, to try and help them do what they're doing, but you'll have your own. And the companies have an incentive to make it work for you, because if it's helping the police instead of you, you'll buy someone else's product. Same way today, if I'm using Google Maps, and I don't know about America, but in the UK, you're driving along, Google Maps will alert you to where there are speed cameras. They will alert you to where there are police stops. It'll tell you speed camera coming up. You'll even see a little flash if you're exceeding the speed limit. That's Google helping you against the police because they have an incentive to do that, because if they didn't, you'd pick someone else's product.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting discussion. We will continue for years and months to come. Yeah, I didn't mean to be overly negative. I appreciate David's counter arguments there. I think what you're seeing is the future coming for us in real time as we discuss the effects on all this, right? Like, I want to get to this next comment from Tim Cook, but I think that was valid what we just discussed as the space for that comment, right? He does this all the time. He comes out and gives an interview and builds a lot of buzz by saying something juicy about his version of the future that he expects to see. And it's always, it's like I saw this with Epic Games, right? Epic has been proven in court to actually have a very solid argument about the monopoly that is in place by Google. It's not a monopoly; it's a duopoly of Google and Apple over the storefronts that we all install in our phones. But they had to spend billions or hundreds of millions of dollars in court to prove their point and make that argument valid. But like, before that got proven in court, all we had was the word of Tim Sweeney coming out on Twitter saying this is wrong and trying to reframe everything in his defense, right? And here we are, Epic has won. Zuckerberg does the same thing with Facebook and Meta, right? He's just trying to get everyone thinking in terms that let Meta and Facebook do what they want in everywhere in the world.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, even when they are making arguments that do have validity to them, their incentive here is to sell products and increase the share price. This is the CEO of a giant corporation. That always has to be taken into account. You're right to say this is not some random Zoomer off the street, despite what his haircut and golden chain may be trying to imply. Ready to talk about the Tim Cook quote then?
Yep, let's get into the Tim Cook, and then we've got the interesting research. And to answer to Jorgensen out there, I think some of the research involving Google will be very interesting to reply to your comment on very soon. But yeah, why don't you get into this, David?
Yeah, so there has been wide public perception that Apple has given up or forgotten about Vision Pro and visionOS. And at UploadVR, we have obviously been pointing out how that is completely untrue. The company has been releasing incredibly impressive visionOS updates. visionOS 2 was huge. visionOS 2.2 gave us that ultra-wide Mac Virtual Display mode. 2.4 brought really great iPhone integration of all kinds, like guest mode. You can unlock your headset with your iPhone. You can even do any authenticated things like Apple Pay while you have the headset on your iPhone. They've really smoothed out a lot of things. visionOS 26 is now the most impressive XR operating system of all time. It's set to come out probably next month. Apple hasn't given a month, but that's when we expect it to arrive. It's in beta right now. We're all trying it. It is truly, as I keep saying, the best XR operating system ever made. And Apple is clearly putting massive investments into it when you see how many features are there in visionOS 26. And Tim Cook is now just kind of stating this very clearly. He was asked during Apple's earnings call where they blasted through expectations. They really beat what people thought they were going to make in terms of their overall revenue and profit and such. He said, when asked about Vision Pro and glasses and things like that, he started talking about visionOS and said, we continue to be very focused on it. I don't want to get into the roadmap on it, but this is an area that we really believe in. That I don't want to get into the roadmap on it is how someone like Tim Cook says, there's going to be more Vision headsets. This isn't the end. Stuff is coming. And we've been talking on this show about all the reports about how there might be, or likely will be, an M4 Vision Pro refresh soon with a more comfortable strap. And then how Apple's kind of primary development resources for Vision are going into what some analysts have dubbed Vision Air for 2027, with the goal of being roughly half the weight and half the price, which is what they need for a slam dunk, right?
What's the name of Rockwell? What's Rockwell's first name?
Mike Rockwell.
Mike Rockwell. So Mike Rockwell, as we understand, is the guy who ran the development of the Apple Vision Pro program, put all the pieces together necessary to ship a VR headset from nothing, right? Like Apple had to go from shipping no VR headsets to shipping a VR headset, and this person's project picking up the pieces, and we've seen these pieces in our reporting. You can find them on our website, Next VR, Spaces. They were picked up like just pieces of a puzzle to put together this platform for Apple. And it's been years. And here's the thing: I've never spoken with Mike Rockwell. I have no inside sourcing to indicate that the conversation went like this. But sometime, let's say it's a year or 2 years before Apple Vision Pro ships, Mike Rockwell has to come to Tim Cook and say, you know, if you don't ship this one, I think you should cancel the whole program. Or Tim Cook says the same thing to um to Mike, right? They essentially get to this point where if we don't ship it by now, we are too far behind the competition. I just believe in my heart that if that based on the scale of everything, the charting of how Meta has achieved with the sales on Quest 2 and Quest 3, the overall market of everything, even the fact that Android XR is also buying into this and getting into the market, that some kind of conversation had to happen here. And this is my belabored way of explaining that this is them just getting started, right? They have to spin up display manufacturing. They have to all the researchers that they have to pull from other teams to start developing next generation versions of all of this technology. It's just spinning up slowly. And so like all of us as devs as VR enthusiasts who've been watching this are used to Meta putting basically everything out on the table. Like, this is the best we can do. Take it and screw around with it, see if it works. If it doesn't, we're going to cancel it. And like, we're going to show you our research. We're going to show you, let us know what's good and bad about these ideas that we're throwing out there. And everyone who's been in this for a decade is not used to this Apple approach, which is just wait for us to get it right? Just give us time. And we're all just like, are they dead? Are they dead? They must be dead. They must be dead. Right? We're not used to this pace. I want everyone to understand that's the pace of Apple here. They're taking their time to try to get it right. And so like, I wouldn't put it past them to put surprising products in front of us at surprising prices because of this slow build-up thing that they're doing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're completely correct there. This is Apple getting started. They are taking a patient, long-term approach. And in our current news cycle and kind of hype cycle world where everything has to happen in days or months or else it's not real, that's hard to square. Modern tech journalists, most of them kind of grew up while the smartphone was rapidly accelerating every year, not realizing that the smartphone was the culmination of decades of pocket computers and mobile computers in general. This is one of those our plans are measured in decades moments, not centuries like Dune, but it is decades here that Apple and Meta are measuring their plans. And I think as well as having to get something out there to build from as a kind of first flagpole, it also is about the developer ecosystem. You have to get the SDK out there. You have to get people working with it. You have to build up developer knowledge. You have to get users in there to figure out what works and what doesn't. And then they can look at what are people using their Vision Pro for? What do they like about it? What do they not like? And I think it's also putting out a minimum quality bar. It is kind of, Tim Cook, a few months before Vision Pro shipped, went on Good Morning America and said, this product is going to let you live in the future. And he was asked about the price, and I don't want to give it, I can't remember the exact quotes, but he didn't deny that it was expensive. Nobody at Apple thinks $3,500 is affordable. Apple are often accused of being in their own little world and being out of touch with reality, but they're not out of that. They're not that out of touch. They know that $3,500 isn't. They called it Apple Vision Pro as the first product for a reason. They are working to try and get, cheaper displays that are more mass producible, figure out how to cut down the weight. All of these things are Apple's top priorities. And the thing is that, like, nobody says, or at least I've never met anyone that says that Vision Pro is a bad experience. It's a very high quality experience. It's just too expensive and too heavy. That's a much better problem to have than not having a good enough experience and trying to scale that out. They have a working formula here. They just need to scale it up. And I see a commenter going here saying, Vision Pro needs VR controllers. And even Apple has budged on that. They want this to work so much that they've taken their stubbornness about clumsy VR controllers. And in visionOS 26, we're getting PlayStation VR 2 Sense controller support and Logitech Muse. So you get a controller for gaming and a controller for creativity and other kind of precision one-handed work there. They really are wanting to make this work. This is not the Apple of 10 years ago that would have stubbornly rather died than ship something like controllers. This is a new Apple, and they want this to work.
What's fascinating here, and this is the thing that is a legendary misadventure quote that we're going to be wondering about over the next year or two, right? There was an opportunity anywhere in the last 5 years for Meta to choose to make the touch controllers less of a bundled part of the Quest experience. Now, we have had hour-long arguments with our audience, with each other, about why that doesn't make sense. Meta clearly chose a different path, but part of this frustration was Apple saying, no, I'm sorry, you have to go with pinch gaze first, and then layer in all of this other stuff on top of it. And I'm sorry, but it was the right choice for me, at least, right? And yes, for a year here, I've been frustrated that I haven't been able to play a PC VR game. I've gotten Half-Life Alyx running with Joy-Cons, fill in the bingo cards. That's the best I could do. And y'all made fun of me for it, rightly, right? Because that was crap experience to have to imagine this $3,500 top end of the line machine. But here we are, right? visionOS 26, they're rounding the corner and bringing it as a first-class entity, saying, yeah, we hear you, right? They're just taking their time with it.
Yeah, I think you're right about the gaze and pinch. There were kind of two things in Vision Pro that Apple says, this is the minimum quality bar you need. One of them is 4K micro OLED displays or near 4K. I don't think Apple will ever ship an LCD headset. And I think it matters when it comes to some of these use cases around virtual screens. The resolution and the contrast both matter. And I don't think they will ever ship a headset without eye tracking. And let me put this another way around. I don't think Meta will ever ship another headset without eye tracking. I think every Meta headset from now on will use this gaze and pinch. Once you use it, once you have some time with it, once you've spent any amount of time with it to get used to it, you realize that this is going to be the default interaction method for all of the future. So let me put it this way. Future Quests are going to resemble Vision Pro and its decisions more than future Vision headsets will resemble anything from Quest. But that does mean we're in for a painful time where for most people, for the next few years, Apple's experience is going to be unaffordable, and it's a shame, but that's how technology goes sometimes. The first Macintosh in today's money was tens of thousands of dollars. The first DVD player was $1,000. I could go on and on about all the examples of how truly new breakthrough technologies are expensive at first. It is unfortunate. It sucks because I really wish everyone in the world could afford a Vision Pro. And eventually they will be, right? Eventually this quality of experience will be affordable as the micro OLED supply chain goes from a tiny blip in display companies' business to a huge part of it over time. It will happen, but it's going to take time.
I wonder if I can phrase this question correctly. What was the name of the Aliens game, Alien Rogue Incursion, that came out last year? All right, so let me see if I can phrase this question correctly for our audience, and then I want to see in the comments how you reply because I'm just curious. I'm going to take like an informal poll of our audience. Would you rather play Alien Isolation on a 80-inch screen at 4K with stereoscopic depth to the scene? So it's all you're playing Isolation with a gamepad in your hand, and you're seeing depth of the world like it's a panel into the window, and it's stereoscopic over there, right? Now you're playing Alien Isolation. It's an OLED screen, like I said, 80 inches. Would you rather play that with stereoscopic depth, or would you rather go play part one Alien Rogue Incursion on the Meta Quest 3?
It's a tough one. For me, I like being in real VR. I would pick Rogue Incursion. But obviously, we all wish that we could have the quality of experience of isolation, but in full VR. And I think with mods, you can, right? Modders achieve this. They bring these full games in. But the idea is that we want both. Ideally, you could imagine the ability to switch between them at any time, but that has serious game design problems. Anyway, are we ready to move on to talk about some research stuff now?
Yep. This is the fun one. I'm ready to see people break their minds apart on some of this. I'm especially excited to get to the proxies. So why don't you run through these first two?
Sure. So this first one is called You Only Render Once, YORO. And it is from two researchers from University of California, San Diego, two from University of Colorado, Denver, and one from University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and finally one from Guangdong University of Technology in China. So while standalone VR headsets like Quest can optimize the CPU draw calls of stereo rendering two eyes at once through a technique called single pass stereo, and a lot of VR games will have this turned on. The only time you wouldn't is if you're using a shader that doesn't support it, but most VR devs on serious projects will adapt their shaders to do it. That's already today, is what I'm trying to say. You can get rid of most of the CPU overhead of having to render two eyes, but you still don't get rid of the GPU overhead. The GPU still has to render both eyes, and one of the worst parts of that is the expensive per pixel shading and the memory overhead, the memory bandwidth of these two views. So You Only Render Once is a fascinating new approach. It starts by rendering one eye, as usual, but instead of rendering the other eye, it efficiently synthesizes it through two stages: reprojection and patching. The reprojection stage uses a compute shader to shift every pixel from the rendered eye into what would be the other eye's screen space, and it then marks which pixels are occluded, meaning which pixels are not visible. So here this would be, these missing information markers. That's where the second stage, the patching stage, come in. It's a lightweight image shader that applies a depth-aware in-paint filter to the occluded pixels marked by the reprojection step, blurring background pixels into them. So these researchers claim that YORO decreases GPU rendering overhead by over 50%. And they claim, this is the crazy part, that the synthetics eye view is visually lossless in most cases. The exception being in the very near field, lower than 13 centimeters distance from your eyes. In that case, they suggest just falling back to regular stereo rendering. And in fact, you could do that adaptively, and you could even do that for only objects that are nearby. So then anything that comes within 13 centimeters of your face is truly rendered in stereo. Everything else is synthesized. The other limitation is that it doesn't support transparency, but as they rightly point out, mobile VR doesn't really work well with transparency anyway, since it requires another render pass, and you could theoretically put YORO in between those passes. So in a real-world test on a Quest 2 using Unity's VR Beginner, the escape room sample, implementing YORO, according to these researchers, increased the frame rate by 32%, from 62 to 82 FPS. So very interesting research. There obviously are caveats, but that kind of performance increase is interesting and important for standalone VR. And in coming years, we'll be watching to see whether companies like Meta, ByteDance, and Apple want to incorporate ideas like this in any way. One thing I want to be crystal clear about, if anyone got a misconception here, this is not an AI technique. There is no neural networks involved here, no AI hallucination. It is just a series of compute and image shaders. Also, you already need the depth buffer. If anyone's wondering, on mobile VR, it's already there, so that doesn't add any overhead. Also, you may be used to like reprojection artifacts from things like Space Warp. So you may think, oh, there's going to be big artifacts. But keep in mind that Space Warp is temporal reprojection using the old frame, whereas this is spatial reprojection using the current frame. So you don't get the artifacts that are caused by the low resolution of the motion vectors, and the other things that have changed. So I just want to make that crystal clear. Very interesting stuff.
Yep. I love the next research we're going to go into, but before we move on, the only thing I'm going to add of note here is I do want a T-shirt that just says "You only render once" on the back. That's all. That's the only thing of consequence I have to add here.
It's a very cool name. You can imagine that. I think a lot of these research papers, they come up with the name last. So I can just imagine these people from, all of these American universities, and then this Chinese researcher as well from that other university, coming in and being around a table and coming up with this and going, damn, that's good. A clever name for a paper.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. All right. What's the next one, Dave? It's with 3 full-body codec avatars. Why is this significant? And what do we have ahead of us to really get where we want to go with avatars in the meta ecosystem?
Sure. So we're not going to go into the full codec avatar discussion because we did last week. We went quite deep. You should, if you watch this show, be familiar that it's Meta's 10-year research project, one of their biggest software investments, to try and deliver photorealistic, face-tracked and eye-tracked avatars for VR and mixed reality and eventually AR that deliver a sensation called social presence, the feeling that you're actually sitting across from another human being, a feeling that no flat screen technology can ever achieve by its nature. The only time you will have ever experienced this feeling is in real life when you're really sitting across from a person. But it is, according to Meta's research, and I think Ian even tried it out the highest quality version himself and confirmed, it is possible to generate that same sensation in the brain, social presence, that today we only get in real life. And when we talk about photorealistic avatars, you're thinking, like a lot of people are thinking this is like a qualitative thing, that it's just better and better over time. But there is a boundary at which something happens, a new effect is introduced, something occurs in your brain where all of those systems in your brain that have been designed by evolution for millions of years to figure out what is another human being in front of you, that clicks and ticks in. And so if they can ship that in a product, it becomes arguably as significant as the invention of the telephone or the video call. So that's why this is so important. Of course, shipping that at that quality is a long way off. We've been talking recently about all of the advancements. One of the big issues has been that all of these impressive demos from Meta's codec avatars have been rendered on a high-end PC. Now, Meta's research is showing how these Gaussian splatting codec avatars can be distilled to run 3 of them in real time at 72 frames per second on a Quest 3. So distillation, this term, you may have heard it in the context of LLMs or AI in general, like when you see, GPT-5 and GPT-5 Mini and GPT-5 Nano. What it means is using the output of a large computationally expensive model to train a much smaller model. And the idea is that the smaller model can replicate the large model efficiently, but with minimal quality loss. So the researchers claim that there's almost no quality loss compared to the full quality avatars here, other than things like under the armpits and certain parts of the body where there are some minor blurring issues. But there are some trade-offs to note. While the high-quality avatars we discussed last week that split off the hair, you may remember our discussion from last week, are able to be generated from a smartphone scan, the avatars that we are talking about here, these ones that have been made to run on standalone, require the full capture studio, the kind of more than 100 cameras and hundreds of lights that Meta has been using for years. So they're in an interesting place now where they have one system that is very high quality, can be generated from a smartphone scan, but runs on a PC, and another system that can run on standalone VR, is high quality still. The quality there bar is good. All of them have got quality, but it requires this kind of expensive, wildly unpractical capture rig. There are other trade-offs to this one that runs on Quest 3. They have the ones that we talked about that run on a PC, have dynamic relighting. We talked about that last week as being a very important part of these. These can be put into any lighting condition and they'll reflect that. As you can kind of see, the Quest 3 ones have flat lighting. They are not dynamically relit. So that will need to be solved before this can ship. But over the past 10 years of Meta working on this and the past 7 years of us reporting on it, Meta's head of codec avatars has often talked about how many miracles were needed. At the start, it was, 10 miracles, then 5 miracles, then 3 miracles. And I think we're now at like 1 or 2. There's 1 or 2 jumps left for Meta to be able to ship this in a headset. And of course, you have to point out that Apple is shipping something very similar. When Meta does eventually ship this, we do expect it to be head only at first, just like Apple's. Full body will come later. This is just research showing that from a performance perspective, getting it to run on Quest 3, adding the full body is not difficult. Of course, how you track that, how you generate it in the first place is a major challenge. When it comes to when Meta is going to ship this at all, as we pointed out last week, the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges, is that the company does not sell a headset with eye tracking and face tracking. Quest Pro was discontinued at the start of this year. Quest 3 and Quest 3S do not have eye tracking or face tracking. Meta has shown research on doing sort of synthetic facial expressions. We are using a very simple version of that right now. I don't have eye tracking or face tracking, yet my mouth is moving and my eyes are moving. That's an example of how it can be synthesized. That could be done on codec avatars, but there's a much greater kind of social cost and trade-off there if you have a realistic version of yourself making expressions that you aren't making. And thus, I think that it's unlikely that codec avatars will ship without eye and face tracking, other than maybe to replace your Meta avatar in video calls where it's just showing on a 2D screen. That's something that we could see happening. We will obviously be keeping a close eye on Meta Connect 2025 next month to see if there's any hints from Meta about where this is going.
Yeah, and of course we will be pursuing any hands-on demos at any events we can have. Like one of the conferences David is going to, SIGGRAPH had the codec avatars on display years ago. We got to see them and got to see some of their thinking and the way they were approaching all this. That's where they frequently say these things: this future-facing graphics conference, computer graphics, the place where Pixar would debut their new technologies back in like the 1990s, right? This same conference is where they will show the future human representations that are as important as the original telephone. It's remarkable to see this path. Again, this is my recommendation to, support UploadVR, become a member at uploadvr.com, because when we actually go and get these demos, we're going to bring back the constraints that are still ahead of us. We're going to strip away some of that hype and really get to the core of actually what still needs to happen here to make this all work as we all dream it to work. But I'm seeing a lot of people in our audience that, you've gotten used to these avatars, right? And we tried to do one show from Personas and found out that Apple's software for FaceTime on the web is so horrible we could not manage that broadcast. And that's fundamental, right? You were able to build this rock solid. We have some glitches from time to time, but we can't have that happening, right? We can't have a glitchy web experience be the foundation of our broadcast studio. So you haven't seen these amazing Apple personas in front of you for the last few years. And we've been dying to get inside of these avatars, inside of Meta's headsets for years now, haven't we?
Yeah, so look, in fairness to Apple, that test we did was a year and a half ago. They could have improved the stability of FaceTime for web since then. It was not great, as you say, back then, but it might have changed. The issue, of course, is that you can't have the spatial 3D personas without having a third Vision Pro that would act as the camera. We've gone over this before. It's unfortunate. We wish we could afford it. As we just talked about, $3,500 is a hell of a lot of money. And also there'd be significant practicality issues in having to set up a Vision Pro and kind of, make sure that it's still active and cover, the lenses to make it think that it's still in use. And there would be a bunch of practicality issues. We'd love to do it. Ideally, Apple adds an API in visionOS 27 to allow, for example, a MacBook to act as the camera. Because right now, a Windows PC is our camera. It's a third participant here that is appearing not as an avatar, but as a camera light, essentially, that switches between the lights. Apple would need to add an API for that. They have macOS spatial rendering now, so they are integrating visionOS and macOS in interesting ways. I don't see any reason that it couldn't happen.
So I love this comment, and it's the people are talking about the legs that Zuckerberg promised, and we exclusively reported that the legs that were shown in that original demo were CGI legs, that they were animated by hand or just animated. And the thing about it is, right, here's our commenters going, I have legs, my avatar has legs. And the silly thing about it is, right, here's Mark Zuckerberg coming out on stage at an event and saying, you get a leg, and you get a leg, and you get a leg, but none of you can dance or kick a soccer ball with them.
Yeah, it gets into the difference between tracking and estimation, right? So just before I get into this, Mr. Mycelium is asking the question, does Apple not have an API for their avatars? No, you can't. It gets into how visionOS works. There is no API or SDK for spatial personas in the sense that you could build them into your own Unity app or Unreal app or something like that. Spatial personas are a system level feature. You can only access them through FaceTime, but then you can still hang out with someone while you're playing a visionOS app that runs in the shared space because the system is handling the rendering. The game you're playing is an app that runs alongside all the other apps. And you could think of spatial personas as a first party app that is built into the shared space. But as a developer, you could never do anything specific with them, right? I can't sample the textures or pull off the model or anything like that. I don't get any access like that on visionOS. You support them, and you can do things like mark the positions at which different sizes of groups will be placed so that you can make sure people are placed in the right position around a chessboard or whatever kind of game you want to do. That's all possible, but you never get access to the personas. It is, as Anakazi's saying, it's like a black box. It is just, you support being in a shared space. Apple handles doing all of the avatars. But getting into what Ian said, because it's absolutely fascinating, and you're right to say that Mark Zuckerberg was incredibly misleading about this. Quest 3 and 3S can track the green area you see on screen here. Ignore this right image, it's completely unrelated. This green area, the cameras on your headset are actually tracking. For the legs, it is using an AI estimate. Now, it's pretty good. The legs can be good when you're using the highest quality generative legs. But as Ian points out rightly, it's never going to actually support you moving your legs, and for things like kicking, for things like dancing, for just bringing your knee up. How do I put this? You can make it look pretty much natural for you to walk around a room. You can sit down and have the legs match you well. All of these things AI models can do, but at the end of the day, you need enough signal. You can't generate where you don't have any signal at all, right? I can't AI generate a picture of you in your bedroom right now because it doesn't have a picture of anything to go off. If I had a really, really low resolution image of you in your bedroom, this sounds so creepy, but you could upscale it. But in here, they don't have any tracking of your legs. They know where your torso is, but the number of possible combinations for where your leg could be while your torso and arms are in a given position are extreme. Like the combinatorial here is just extreme. They can never actually really know. So how do you solve this? Eventually, you would need to have the cameras on the headset actually optically track your legs. Was one solution. As we talk about a lot on this show, there are significant ergonomic, for lack of a better word, issues around that. You could have, a large stomach or a large frame body in general. You might have a large breast. All kinds of parts of your torso could occlude the camera's view of your legs. How do you solve that? You could put cameras in the handles of the controllers. We've seen research on that in the past. And then you can fuse the camera view from the headset and the controllers. All of this is framing the question in how do you do it without strapping things to your body. Of course, if you want to strap trackers to your body, this gets a lot easier. But Meta has signaled multiple times, Meta CTO, that he is not interested in shipping something that has to be strapped onto your legs.
I mean, that makes sense. Like it's fascinating to think about that, like, framework for an employee or for an entire engineering structure. You're like, I've been a broken record a little bit about this, but imagine like a CEO or an executive saying, why why would we do a VR headset if people couldn't learn how to dance using it? Right. And then you go get a team together to solve this problem for you. How do you have a virtual trainer teach a pair of people wearing headsets actually how to dance by looking down and seeing the footsteps right in front of them? And it's like a Beat Saber game except for dancing. You have to have vision and put resources where they are to develop these things and see them through to fruition. The one that kills me, it's completely unrelated to, well, it's not completely unrelated to body tracking, but piano vision and guitar learning apps. There's apps out there today where you can theoretically learn to use an instrument with your VR headset, with your Quest. But syncing up the keyboard of Piano Vision, whatever keyboard is available to Piano Vision, is actually a really hard step. It's actually really hard to get those keys to roll over your whatever keyboard you bring, no matter what. It's hard. And that's a fundamental feature that unlocks entire classes of people, entire use cases for these headsets that are just non-starters for people. So like I it's you know it's like the we've limited how many people will use these headsets because of these things, because of this whole pipeline, right? Anyone that is a dancer at heart or might ever want to learn how to dance is not going to be interested in a VR headset if there's not a proper app for that. So like just devs have had to bend over backwards to try to make their apps work. Examples being there was a soccer app that launched with the original, I think it was PSVR. I can't remember the name offhand. Someone will remember it. But the only mechanic they could build into a soccer app was headbutting the
Just
ball into the
faster.
goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, like developers are geniuses for trying to work around these constraints, but users just don't go buy the device because of the constraints. And all I want us to talk about is that this is literally like a lot of constraints that someone has imposed upon our devices. And like, I want to learn how to play musical instruments in my headset. I want to learn how to dance in my headset. And I think those things will come, but will they come from Meta or will they come from someone else first?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, even with today's avatars, and it will matter just as much with codec avatars. To really truly feel like someone is in the room with you, you need to see their body movement. And you can imagine the first codec avatars, um, be using clever design techniques like having a table between you so that you can't see the person's legs and staying seated, focused. It's a big issue with Apple's personas, right? As much as I love them, as much as I think the new ones in visionOS 26 are amazing, it does suck that it's just a floating head. You don't even have a torso yet there, right? So we're talking about like Meta not having real legs, only like Apple. Of course, it's not a fair comparison because personas are highly realistic, but like they don't even have a torso. They don't even have a neck. Like, they have a neck, but they don't have the shoulders. They don't have anything other than just floating,
I,
ghostly hands. And
I have to
again,
describe
they're
this
they're
for
great, but that's it.
yeah. So I have to describe this. I put on my Vision Pro last night at 12:30 in the morning, and I had the lights off in my office, and I'm on the latest Vision OS beta. And I look down, and my hands are there as ghosts. I'm looking just like I am right now in total darkness, and I'm seeing my hands represented as ghostly outlines, and I'm flipping them over and I'm looking at them. And I'm realizing as I'm looking at them, Apple is giving me embodiment when my own eyes will not. All right, let's move
As
on.
in the dark. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, while you're in the dark, you can even see it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, Vision Pro's approach in general. We don't really talk about it enough, but in general, when you're in VR on a Quest or Steam VR, PlayStation VR, you see a computer graphics version of your arms and hands, right? Now, right now, I'm seeing a really low detail cartoon of my hands and arms in high graphics games on PlayStation VR 2 and PC VR, and on the best games on Quest, you're going to see like a high detailed video game character's arms and hands, but they're still not yours, right? It could look great, but it's still not yours. On Vision Pro, it literally just cuts out your hands and arms with the pass-through cameras and shows you them. So it's you in VR, which I think is really cool. And it's an interesting solution, but it doesn't really scale well to multiplayer, right? You would have to. Well, we can talk about another time how that would have to scale to multiplayer. Let's move on to the next topic. This is a really interesting uh, piece of research from Google that Ian picked up on, showing that proxies could be the key to interacting with physical objects in mixed reality.
Yeah, very cool research. I wish we could show the video, and I think there's going to be more released on this research between now and when they actually hold the conference to talk about this research in Korea at the end of September. But the idea here is that AI or mapping data can be used to create a near field representation of far field objects. So here's an example of the way it is right now on the left. The headset sends a little ray out and you highlight what you're looking at over there, tries to guess. And here's on the right the system that they've envisioned, which imagines the headset's cameras looking over there at the stuff over there, creating a local little miniature version of the stuff over there. And then you take direct manipulation. You take your fingers and you actually move through these objects and select them, right? This little dollhouse version that's directly in front of you, you grab. And they showed some various concepts for this idea being used to control drone swarms. I think that was the most extreme idea. I think it was a concept. I don't think they actually did this in the research, but they showed how it could be done, where you imagine a whole fleet of drones out there hovering in midair, kind of like a army in Command and Conquer. Your the maybe trackers inside of the drones transmit their data of where they are, combining with the AI sensing on the glass on your headset, and then you get a representation in 3D space right here of the location of all of the drones. And then you take your pinch finger and you drag a cube over the drones that you want. And just like Command and Conquer back in the old days when you were dragging a box with your mouse, now you're selecting a whole fleet of drones that are flying up there in the air. And then you take another gesture and you just, you move that set of drones over here, that set of drones over here. And now you're, was it Mr. Fantastic from the new Superman movie? I hope I haven't spoiled anything, but that was a really, really cool depiction in that movie. You can go check it out. But yes, this idea came out from, I think it was University of Minnesota, as well as researchers from Google. And the moment I looked at it, it seemed instantaneously like the right idea. And to Jorgensen pointing out that why would I critique Meta when I wouldn't critique Google? This is making an assumption that you're giving Google quite a bit of access to your environmental data, right? Like there's description in the research about creating a memory or creating an entire workflow a pipeline for how to take like the images it sees right here and then pipe that into an image recognition system. Genius outline, but this is deeply like you're giving AI access to every aspect of your life if you're really using it in this way, and it's a fascinating model to consider. But we are going to have to unfold how much of this happens locally processed, how much happens on the server, and that was what's fascinating in this research is they showed the combination of both of those things. What if you have an occluded object, an object that can't be seen by the cameras, but you have mapping data of the object? You combine those two things, I can't say it word. You combine the two things and you give a person, for example, right before you go into a big building, you show them the map of the building right here, and you show them the path to the building as they go up inside of it. Great idea. I would love all of my maps to work that way in the future. What was remarkable here, David, to me about this whole research is they seem to formalize ideas we all have about VR and about mixed reality, but made it really, really clear to us why this works so well. So devs have already been doing a lot of these ideas or exploring this space for, I don't know, local representations for things, but uh, getting this formalized and spreading this idea out for a lot of people to use, it just seems natural and to make sense. And it goes so far as to, like, you think about Iron Man, you think about all of these movie depictions of user interfaces all the way back to Minority Report, right? With the guy with he's got three fingers because they're the only three fingers that they think that you're going to use. And I think the last two fingers aren't tracked. And he's throwing things like this through the interface. It didn't have this. It didn't have this premise. And you've got 25 years of user interfaces that didn't quite nail this. I'm thinking of Shuri in, what was it? The first Black Panther movie, when she's in the model of the car that's going down the street. That was so cool. But like all these representations we've seen in all the different movies over the years, I feel like they could get an upgrade by actually applying this, because this actually works for a viewer. If you set up a camera over there and had it have synced all of this stuff, you could actually show a third person, a third perspective out there, exactly what the person is doing within their mixed reality headset by representing all these little boxes right in front of them in the exact right view. Anyways, I would like future Iron Man movies, anything that shows a future interface, to use this idea. And then I would also like all of our headsets to actually use this idea, because it seems like a no-brainer. If you go back, I don't know, a month or two in a couple of our podcasts, I did this with Don. I talked about Real Room, where I had to manually go in and input all the movies in my collection using an old interface to do it. I had to it was just maddening to have to text input every movie in my collection in order to get a list of them over on the wall. And at the end of this, I had a cool little shelf representing, just like this, my movies over on the wall. But it would be just so much easier if I could open up a book of all of my Blu-rays and just say, this is my Blu-ray collection. And I go through all the pages of my Blu-ray collection. And then I say, okay, now give me a shelf over on the wall and let me interact with that shelf. And I could do all that direct manipulation on the local versions of the shelf I have represented on the wall. Anyways, wildly cool ideas. I don't know if we have the researchers tuned into us today. I did invite them, but if you're out there, researchers, please chime in the comments. And thank you for tuning in today.
Yeah, so I think a few commenters are kind of confused about what the advantage is of here and kind of the point. And we strongly recommend you go to the article and watch the video in the article, because that'll make it a lot more clear, especially when you see some of the examples with drones. Essentially, the idea is precision, right? So if you're trying to interact with something like this, tiny imperfections in eye tracking and hand tracking mean that at a distance, you're going to end up often selecting the wrong thing and not having this feeling of kind of precise control. Whereas by bringing this closer into the near field and letting you use your fingers in the near field at small distances, like our hands were designed to be used, right? They're designed to be used for things that are in arm's length for obvious reasons. Our entire kind of perceptual system and our kinesthetic system, it's all designed for the near field. That means that you can more precisely make selections and manipulations. And this is just an example, to be clear. In this case, it's obviously quite strange to think about, reading a book this way, but it's just an example of the system. I strongly recommend reading the article for more details.
Yeah, I mean, so there's various examples you could highlight. One of the things that's hard to read without looking at the video, but imagine you're grabbing this, you want to read this book or find out more information about it. So you grab this cube off the thing, and it gets you the digital equivalent of whatever this thing is over on the wall. It saves you a trip over there to the wall to sort through this stuff. Maybe you don't have to make that trip over the wall over to the bookcase to go do it. And you can imagine, I imagine the reaction to that is how lazy can we be? Right? That's the gut reaction. When all I'm doing is I'm trying to illustrate the most mundane example of how this will eventually be used to interact with all sorts of stuff around us with this local things. The Arlen, I think earlier in the conversation, nailed a really good idea for this. I would love to see board games represented in this way, where you let the AI, you could build a repository of certain game types, or just let it look at the board and make sense of it. But you can imagine, the Clank is the game that I always talk about. I've been playing it like crazy here. It's available on practically every platform, and they're adding new features to it. But what I do, the dream way to play Clank is with 4 versions of the board for everyone to interact with, so that they don't have to be tethered to the board, like the board area. Maybe you want to go over to the wall and still have your, you want to go over to a corner of the room and still have your board with you. You can do that with 4 people with VR headsets with 4 copies of the board, or with this cool idea where you're all looking at a big board over there, and then down here you just grab your little proxy, move it from here to here, and then back up on the board, it moves from there to there. And you could have a really effective way of playing board games without any of you moving out of your place, without any of you having to, I don't know. It's going to look silly. We've talked about this in the past. It's going to look silly the way people rearrange their entire homes around the location of a television screen, I think, over the length of time.
Yeah, just to come back on the other audience kind of concerns and confusion around this, another example of how proxies can be useful is for moving objects. So this example, obviously, these are all static things. In the drones example, when you're controlling a fleet of drones, if you want to use eye tracking or hand tracking, like the audience are suggesting, you're going to have to track these moving objects, pan your head around over a large area, and select them with your fingers. Whereas if you have a proxy of these, the distances between them can be scaled such to keep it within your near field. They would be then not to scale distance representations, but still useful and still to scale relative to each other. Again, strongly recommend reading the article. Let's move on to talk about the next topic then. So that's very interesting stuff and really does open a lot of questions. I'm seeing a lot of discussion there in the audience as people kind of get to grips with that. And of course, people even who do understand it may simply disagree, of course. None of this is law, this is still an area of exploration in general, how we're going to interact with real world objects in mixed reality. But yeah, let's talk about Meta's ultra wide field of view and hyper-realistic VR prototype headsets that I will be trying next week. So the existence of these are not new. These headsets were revealed, I think, 2 weeks ago. We talked about it 2 episodes ago in the abstract of research papers, but now Meta has gone into a lot more detail. So back then, we saw some images of these ultra-wide field of view headsets that seem to have relatively similar form factor to Quest 3. We knew the field of view of 180 degrees by 120 from the paper, but we have a lot more detail now from this Meta blog post that we have covered in our article on UploadVR.com. So one of the things we found out is the name. It turns out that this one is called Boba 2. It's actually shown on screen, and it's from last year. And what Meta will actually be demoing is a slightly sleeker headset and 2 variants, VR and MR, of course, called Boba 3. So we're even closer here to the form factor of today's Quests, despite having a significantly wider field of view. The other headset they're showing is called Tiramisu, and it has a completely different focus. It has a tiny 33-degree field of view, but focuses on delivering hyper-realistic VR with beyond retinal resolution, much higher brightness than Quest 3, 14 times the brightness of Quest 3, and 3 times the contrast. So 3 headsets in total, 2 variants of Boba 3, and 1 variant, the only variant of Tiramisu. So let's just talk quickly about what these headsets are and what they mean. Let's start with Boba 3. Here on this image, you can see the VR variant of it, which does not have pass-through cameras. So Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth back in October showed off this wide field of view prototype that he said at the time was 210 degrees. And he pointed out how, it was heavy and wide. So it wasn't practical. The form factor was too big. The weight was too big. So it's not a practical thing to ship. Turns out that was called Boba 1. And you can see it here. And it is from 9 years ago. So Bosworth was talking about where the research teams were 9 years ago. Last year, they got to Boba 2. Boba 1 had 2K resolution, which is, in addition to its form factor, meant that it just wasn't practical. At that kind of field of view, that resolution just does not give you a good angular resolution. It's not practical. Boba 2 got up to 3K resolution, getting there, and obviously achieved a much more practical form factor that's close to what we have for Quest headsets today. Then Boba 3 from this year, which is what I'm trying at SIGGRAPH next week, has a resolution of 4K per eye, which Meta says can finally deliver sufficient central angular resolution to make ultra-wide field of view viable. So just to be clear about that field of view, for both Boba 2 and 3, it's 180 degrees wide and 120 tall. That compares to 110 by 96 for a Quest 3. Human vision is roughly 200 by 135. In simpler terms, Meta says that Boba 3 covers 90% of the human field of view compared to 46% for Quest 3. So your Quest 3 is only showing 50% roughly, 54% specifically of your field of view. Most of what you would normally see in reality is blocked off, whereas Boba 3 gets up to 90%. And I am very excited to try this. I don't want to get into today what it might feel like, because why would I want to try it next week? We're just going to describe it today. Resolution-wise, because it's using these 4K panels, and they have a distorted, not visually distorted to you, but as in they focus the angular resolution at the center such that it is lower and lower resolution as you go out, just like most headsets. It actually has an angular resolution of 30 pixels per degree, higher than the 25 of Quest 3, and that compares to human retinal resolution of 60. But what's most interesting about Boba 3, what makes this much more remarkable than any Pimax headset or Boba 1, is that it does this in a practical form factor. So you can see here, this is pretty much the same kind of form factor as a Quest 3 or 3S. Right? We're not talking about a hammerhead shark design. And when we first saw these in the research paper, I said, but we don't know the weight. Maybe it's really, really heavy. Well, now Meta has revealed the weight. So Boba 3 VR, the version without pass-through you see here, weighs 660 grams. But keep in mind, this includes its rigid plastic strap. So we would need to compare this to a Quest 3 with an Elite strap, which is 698 grams. Now, this is not a standalone headset. It does have a chip on board, but it's designed to be driven by a PC. But still, we're not talking about a multi-kilogram beast here. It is lighter than a Quest 3. And it's similar to what you would get on many headsets, right? It's like, this is not a heavy headset for what it is and having a rigid strap like this. That's a fine weight to ship with a strap like this. It's either the same kind of weight class you would expect for like a PlayStation VR 2. It's lighter than a Valve Index. That's viable. So this is what's remarkable about Boba 3. Andrew Bosworth has often said that there's 4 reasons that you couldn't ship an ultra-wide field of view headset. The form factor, the weight, and then the thermal and compute costs. This gets 2 of those out of the way. There's still a big issue that this thing has a lot of pixels, right? It has a lot of geometry to render. They say that this right now has to be driven by a high-end PC to have the full field of view and practical resolution. It's not viable for standalone. But like, they do say that the technology here is not some exotic time machine. They actually specifically say this is not a time machine. Meta talks about a time machine as like something that lets you preview, 5, 10, 15 years. They say that this uses a custom optical design leveraging a high curvature reflective polarizer. That's how they can do this. They've come up with this novel lens design, but they say it builds on their decades-long investment in pancake lenses, is relatively similar to the tech in Quest 3, and leverages displays that are already in mass production. All that's to say, if Meta really wanted to, they could ship this as a product today. Like, there's nothing here that is we often talk on this show about, oh, well, there's this exotic thing and this exotic thing, and there's no supply chain for this. In the same way that they built out a supply chain for the Quest Pro and Quest 3 lenses, that family, they could build out this. The issue remains then in the fact that it needs to be driven by high-end PC, and that's not what Meta is currently interested in. So that is the story when it comes to Boba 3. Do we want to talk about Boba 3 first or go on to tiramisu?
I wanted to go back to the image of the three of them, and just make a comment that this guy looks like the Dune pilot that has he's got an HMD on, and he's wearing the Vive strap on his head. It's so memorable, but so memorable the sort of flight gear that he's got, and it looks like that. What is the thing on the middle of 2 here? Is that heat exhaust?
Yeah, I think that's cooling for something. I will find out. I'll ask questions about this next week, but they seem to have gotten rid of it in Boba 3. You could still see that you could see that here. I think that's related to the difficulties of adding pass-through. So this is Boba 2, VR and MR. They have to have an extraordinary amount of pixels processed for pass-through, right? To have a decent resolution across this huge field of view. It's astonishing. I think I'm trying to bring up the numbers in a second of how many pixels it is for pass-through, but it's a lot. So I imagine this is actually just the chip to process the pass-through, and that's the cooling architecture. Though if we look at Boba 3, you can see that this is Boba 3, the mixed reality version with pass-through, and yet they seem to have gotten rid of that. Again, these are all things I will be asking about. I'll be trying to figure out what is the case here. It's not unusual to see cooling on these headsets, right? We remember Starburst, how crazy and unwieldy it was when you tried it at SIGGRAPH 2022. Here, Butterscotch Retinal. I have tried retinal resolution. Look at this fan. A lot of this is cooling, but I'm surprised by how sleek and productized Boba 3 looks. And they do note this in the blog post. They say, look, normally we're doing this far off crazy stuff, but this one is not that. This is something you could ship today if you really wanted. Like, they say it wouldn't be cheap. I don't know what that means. Maybe it means 1,000, maybe it means 2,000. And then obviously you have to add on, if you were going to try and make it a standalone headset, not that you could really drive this on a standalone anytime soon, but that would be a challenge. There is a parallel world out there where Meta is still in PC VR and they ship this as a product, and that's frustrating in so many ways.
I want to go to there. All right, I'm sorry. You've never heard me cry on the show before, but David just got it out of me with that. Yeah, no, I've got that editorial in the back of my mind that, like, gosh, that's just, it would be so neat if that had a compatibility mode that let whatever graphics card you bring to it do, you only render once if it really needs to, and it gives it down to 90 degrees field of view, and you're looking through a ski goggle field of view when you're on a low end system. But then you go and finally upgrade your PC, or plug it directly into the vast server farm that Arlen attends to out there, and boom, you've got all the horsepower you ever need for that, right? And you get the full field of view, the full everything. Wouldn't that be? I would be pretty into that. That would be pretty neat.
I think that would be one of the greatest marketing tools for a 5090 of all time. If you get it on your current graphics card and you can't use the full field of view, you would go out and buy one. Very, very excited to try this. Again, I see people in the audience, like Onakazi, wondering, like, is it that the pancake lenses are hard to manufacture? They are not, like, they're not claiming that this is, an unmanufacturable thing. The issue here is that Meta wants to make standalone headsets, and you cannot drive a field of view this wide on a standalone headset. I think just lost Ian there. I'm sure he'll be back soon. So, as Andrew Bosworth almost always points out, the more field of view you have, the more extra pixels you're rendering, and it's in his view, he describes it as like the least useful ones. I think immersion's useful, but at the end of the day, I can't disagree with what he's saying, right? Imagine as a developer, if you now have to render 180 degrees is crazy. Indoors, okay, fine. You're in an outdoor environment in a video game, you're rendering half the world, at once. It has to be seen. Now, sure, eye tracked foveated rendering can be incorporated, and we'll talk about that, but like, this is something that like you would struggle to run any VR game at this field of view and resolution with a 5090. Never mind, you know, on a standalone headset. And sure, foveated rendering is going to help, but it's not. People seem to think foveated rendering is like super crazy magic that just makes every performance problem go away. It helps, but it's not what some people think it is. You still have to render those pixels at some resolution, and that still means that geometry is still being rendered. Anything that has to be simulated, right? The CPU side of this, it's not like you're only simulating, enemies and physics interactions that are right in front of you anymore. Like, think of how important occlusion culling is in every level of modern computer graphics for and physics simulation and NPCs, right? Like, you almost don't realize it if you're not a developer, but they're all that's really being simulated in each frame in a video game is what you're looking at and rendered as well. So once you get rid of that, that's tough. And that just, I'm not even talking about the raw pixels here. Like, there's the raw demand of the fact that you now need to, as I said earlier, you double the field of view in the context of 360 cameras, in the context of headsets. It's the same thing. You double the field of view. You need to double the pixels to get to the same resolution. There are just huge challenges here.
Geek Odin out there calling it the Rift 2, or alleging that maybe the Rift 2 could have done some of these things back in the day.
Well, not till now. They say that like this is a new, like this
Yeah.
is new.
I misrepresented that. I want, it goes to my point, David, that I want I want Meta to focus back in on enthusiasts with this next product, and this looks like they would do it. Like, this is a product that I can imagine a lot of people going like, oh, this actually serves the people who have been buying Pimax devices over the last few years, but with a meta level of content and all those things. And so I want to write an editorial at some point about, the Oculus Rift 2 and how, so even whatever they call it, this still is starting to look like the dream picture for a lot of people. If they put their money, if they follow through, right, they could still.
Well, I don't think they're going to ship this as a product because they don't want to make PC headsets. They want to make standalone headsets. I think, though, there is a parallel universe where this was Rift 5. Like, if we'd had gone down that path, the Meta comes along on the same research path, right? Nothing changes. There's no technology change in this parallel universe. It's just Meta is a PC VR company. Then this is Rift 5. That's what I'm saying. But like, we're on a timeline where we already had Rift 2, 3, and 4, for example. But that's not what we're on. But I hope someone else does it in the same way that Big Screen is a startup that focused on compact headsets and every gram matters. I think there's a room for a startup. If you are listening to this right now and you have the, wherewithal and the contacts and the network and the VC funding possibility, and you're a hardware engineer and you could do this, go do it. Like, there's a market here. If you can somehow take this and bring it into a product to achieve this same thing, people will buy it. This would be a very good selling PC VR headset. It absolutely would be. It's just Meta's not the company that's going to sell it.
Yeah. So David's echoing a couple of the things that are happening in the comments there. People are asking or hinting at sort of the same thing. Why hasn't Meta shipped some of the coolest things that they've shown in their research? And to your point, some of those things were time machines for them to gauge what they actually need to be producing in the future. But I want to throw out this thing that, like, where is it? It was Andrew saying, will Meta make this eventually, or will this be a third-party Meta hardware partner? And I think that's fundamentally a really, really good questions, really, really good set of questions. And what partners they pick for the delivery of this, whether they do or do not actually go and deliver this, are they too spread out by also trying to lock down the supply chain for the AR glasses initiative, because these are two different plants putting out two different types of products, right?
Yeah, look, I don't think a third party is going to do it either, because anyone who makes a third party headset for Meta's ecosystem, you're still using standalone chipsets, right? Meta Horizon OS is an Android-based system that's designed to run on a standalone headset. Could you, in theory, imagine Meta somehow like making it support some kind of the PC style system, maybe, but it's unlikely. I just want to be clear. Meta is not going to ship this as a product. If I'm wrong, I would be the happiest to be wrong I've ever been. For being wrong, I would be overjoyed, but I just want to be clear to our audience here. This is not Meta saying this is a product we're working on. This is Meta saying, here's some really cool technology we developed. Essentially, you may wonder, like, why did they show this stuff? That's a big question. To recruit researchers and engineers to say, here's the coolest place in the world to work on headsets. Look at the stuff we make. Come build the next cool thing with us. That's the primary reason they put this out. That's why this is being shown at SIGGRAPH. SIGGRAPH is a computer graphics and rendering conference and display in some way conference where some of the greatest minds in this kind of technology go. Like, I attended this conference, you have. These are some of the people who live and breathe and push forward computer graphics, rendering, display technology. Meta wants to recruit them. And if there's a startup of them working on something, Meta wants to bring them in. That's the purpose. And I understand that is very unfortunate for people to hear. I wish it was. I want field of view so bad. I don't want to talk about it too much because I want to wait for next week until I try it. But I want to be clear. I think that field of view is the single most important aspect of a VR headset. That's controversial for some, but I have tried other wide field of view prototypes that inform my view of this, and I hope. Let's kind of put this question another way. Will this mean that we see meaningful increases in field of view from future Quest headsets that don't go all the way to 180, right? Because we're talking about Quest 3 is 46% of your field of view. This is 90. Maybe we're kind of putting up a false dichotomy here. Will they stay at 46 or will they jump to 90? Probably they'll go to, 60, 70, 80, and 90 in gradual jumps as standalone chipsets improve, would be my guess.
Well, gosh, there's a lot of discussion out there about just how real all this stuff is and how much we should be getting excited for these ideas. That's the thing I was trying to bring up on the sort of investment side of things is, like, Meta has to get partners to help them get over the finish line. And it's been maddening for us to just look at what Apple has done, right? I had a crack on my Apple Vision Pro. I was able to take it to an Apple store at 1 a.m. here in New York, the only Apple store that's open 24 hours, and hand it off to someone there and got it back a week later with the repair, and it cost me $300 to get that repair. Meta has had to cancel products because they don't have a physical place for you to go and get a repair like that at any hour. Like, if you have, it's just a non-starter for them to ever consider that sort of thing. They don't have the footprint for providing that kind of customer service. They have to build these muscles up one by one and figure out, well, are we going to do this ourselves, or we're going to partner with someone else to provide this level of service to our customer base. And this is true of every headset Meta has shipped, right? What do we want to do ourselves, and what do we want to get our partners to do? And we're all looking at the next 2 years going, we don't know what Meta is choosing to do here. How much are they going to do themselves, and how much are they going to get partners to do? I don't know. We'd love to know. If you know, let us know. Email tips@uploadvr.com. But this is the fundamental question of our time, is just, how does Meta get partners to build anything like this in the next 10 years?
I think the partner that matters for getting to this is Qualcomm. The fundamental limit of standalone VR is the chip. It doesn't matter how fancy your lens and display is if your chipset can't run experiences at a resolution and frame rate that matters, right? That's the fundamental limiting factor. So let's imagine that Qualcomm gets visited by aliens, and Qualcomm gets a chip that is now 50 times faster than what they had before, right? Their mobile GPU gets 50 times faster because aliens have just given them crazy GPU technology, right? Let's add that one equation into reality. Sure, Meta can now ship this because that's the limiting factor. The chip that they don't have, the performance, the thermals, it is the chipset. And that's why it's like I'm bringing up, if they did use PC, if it was a PC VR based company, they could, but they're not. And so, the Meta Horizon OS is a standalone Android operating system to be run on mobile chipsets. And
I love that. I love that. Yes, you've just described the last 10 years of Meta's ecosystem, and I don't know that. I don't know, like how many. I'm going to trigger Geek Godin out there by bringing this up, but how many reports of complaints with the link between PC and standalone have we seen? And how important is that link to the people? Like, what is the hope that that link gets better over time between PC and standalone and Quest? Or is that a fading link for Meta? Like, or is that going to get improved? Because how many people have complained about the issues happening with Quest Link?
Yeah, no, the software quality there is not great. Look, Quest Link exists for Meta to make developers' lives easier. That's the primary purpose. It's not really for end users. Yes, it exists, and of course they have it out. I'm not saying they never wanted it, but like the number one reason that Link exists today and is important to Meta is that you can use it as a developer for rapid iteration when you're building for Quest. Instead of having to compile the APK every time you make a change, you try it on PC using Link. That is actually like Meta's primary care. This is obviously difficult to hear for PC VR users, but that's the reality. Now, look, if you have a good wireless setup, I think Virtual Desktop or Steam Link is better than Link. Of course it is. If you can get away from wanting to use the wire, then Virtual Desktop and Steam Link are the way to go. Now, if you were to try and then run the kind of resolution that you might need to push for this kind of field of view to be practical, that gets more challenging, but it's not impossible. And we're seeing Wi-Fi 7 now be kind of rolled out in more and more routers. And I think we probably expect that Quest, whatever the next Quest is, will probably have Wi-Fi 7. Apple Vision Pro 2, whatever it's called, will probably have Wi-Fi 7. And that's going to be helpful in some ways. Look,
all right, we should move on.
Talk about
world, because that's going to be a big subject for us, right?
Yeah, let's talk about the other headset, Tiramisu, right? We've talked about Boba.
Yeah, okay. Show me that one, David.
Yeah, so we just talked about Boba, and it's two variants, the VR and MR one. But there's an entirely different headset that Meta is showing next week that I'm also trying out called Tiramisu. So, Boba is all about field of view. It's not pushing forward anything else that we know over the state of the art. It's about field of view. Tiramisu is a completely different headset with a completely different focus. In fact, it has a tiny field of view of only 33 by 33 degrees, because that's not what this is about. So we talked about how Boba 3 isn't a time machine. It's something that you could build today, theoretically. Tiramisu is a time machine. It's designed to push forward a very specific aspect of VR, and that is visual quality. It has beyond retinal resolution, high brightness, and high contrast. Specifically, 3.6 times the angular resolution of Quest 3, 14 times the brightness, and 3 times the contrast. In a tiny field of view, yes, but within that little window of field of view, according to Meta, you are seeing the best VR image quality that has ever been seen, the most realistic visuals, a little window into what looks almost real, the closest Meta say they've ever gotten. They say they're actually very, very close with this headset to this idea of the visual Turing test, the idea that you can't tell whether what you're looking through is actually real or virtual. And they are powering this obviously off a high-end PC using Unreal Engine 5 and DLSS 3. But the hardware is also what makes this look so real. So this is 90 pixels per degree. That's actually higher than human retinal resolution is generally accepted to be. There's debates over that. 60 ppd human. So let's be clear again. Quest 3, 25 ppd. Human eye, 60. This, 90. So extreme resolution. I think this is the highest resolution headset that has ever been publicly demoed. In fact, it is the highest resolution headset that's ever been publicly demoed of this kind. The brightness is 1400 nits. Apple Vision Pro and Quest 3 are around 100 nits. So this is 14 times that. Even the good kind of, Omnium VR1, Vario XR4 mini LED headsets that use aspheric lenses, they get to like 200, 300, 400 in the absolute best case nits. So this is significantly brighter than any headset that you would have used. And then the contrast is 3 times Quest 3 as well. Now, again, the trade-off is the field of view is tiny. It has a comically large form factor. You can see that here, right? They're using Quest 2 straps and Quest 2's inside-out tracking, but the form factor here is far beyond Quest 2. It also uses heavy and expensive glass lenses. This is not designed to ever be anything like a product. It's not supposed to be about manufacturability. It's about researching the feeling of what Meta calls hyperrealistic VR. So we have these 2 completely different headsets being shown next week that focus on completely different things. One of them is about immersing you in the virtual world, bringing 90% of your field of vision. So you feel like you're not looking through like a pair of wide binoculars into the world, but you're actually in the world. That's what I've dreamed about for VR for over a decade now. And I think a lot of people care about that too. This tiramisu is a different approach. It's about making sure that that view you're looking in, it's about researching how do you make it look real, and what does that look like and feel like to have it actually look like you're looking into reality, because it looks so sharp and bright and high contrast and realistic. And then Meta uses this to say, how do we prioritize these things when it does come to future products? So they dial up and down the resolution, right? They can literally dynamically, as you're wearing it, go all the way up from 1 to 90 ppd. They can go up and down the resolution, up and down the brightness, up and down the contrast, and they can say, where does it start to matter? Where do we really see gains? Where's diminishing returns? Do you get to this amount of ppd and it doesn't matter much anymore for certain use cases, right? Depending on the application, does the brightness, where does it matter? The contrast, where does it matter? So that's the focus of this. So to cap on this, we have these 3 headsets next week: Boba 3 VR, Boba 3 MR, and Tiramisu. I'll be trying them all. I'll be bringing you my impressions.
Do you think we're going to get 3 articles? Well, 2 articles, 1 article? How are you going to break this down? Do you think it'll be next week or 2 weeks away? Like, what is our VR download going to look like next week with your travel?
Impressions of these alongside my articles. I will have 2 articles. One will be for Boba 3. It's 2 variants, right? They're the same. These are the same headset. One just has pass-through and the other doesn't, right? And then Tiramisu will be the second article. So I think we'll focus on Boba to start, and then Tiramisu will be the second article, and we'll be on here. I may be a little jet lagged and tired, but I'll caffeine in and get up and talk to everyone about what's
awesome. I can't wait to hear about the high resolution one in particular, because I think one of the things that has really constrained VR is this cartoony look that we all have right now. And part of the reason for that cartoony look is the resolution of the devices. It just follows that this is the only look you can get out of this many pixels pushed through the device. And so when you suddenly are faced with a whole lot of brightness and a whole lot of resolution, all of a sudden your brain kind of clicks and realizes, oh, this, virtual reality actually is reality. The idea that this is a cartoon place goes away a little bit. And we've seen glimpses of these things. We've reported on them in the past. David is going to be able to chart the path of increasing clarity here in very clear terms by pointing out, how this compares to previous headsets we've seen, which ones we haven't. I want to say thank you to Parmesan for the donation earlier in the show, and just make another call out here before we move to our last section to say thank you to our members at UploadVR.com for supporting the work that we do. The more and more I listen to David break down these hardware things, it becomes abundantly clear that you are not getting these kinds of breakdowns anywhere else in the world about the next stages of personal computing. So I do encourage you to become a member at UploadVR.com to help us get more help out here doing what we do. David, I want you to fly in first class or business class at least, and we're not there yet, are we?
No, we're not anywhere near there. I am very much so in economy class, but it's okay because I've got an Apple Vision Pro and I can be in my little cinema and have my Mac virtual display. Um, you're nowhere near.
No, I want you
We're,
to you got to kick your legs up and write your article in your Apple Vision Pro. That's the proper way. You just spent days you just drained your brain of all energy talking to these brilliant engineers for 2 days. You're dying there. You just want to give me like a diet. I don't know what you drink. Diet Coke and just hit your legs up and write for 8 hours on your flight back and then enter a coma. Like come and do the show with us and then go and fall asleep for like 2 days. That's how we want to travel. That's how you want to travel, isn't it?
well, yeah, yes, very much so. But I think we need a lot more members and patrons for anything other than economy. But it's okay. It's fine.
We're practicing our NPR calls for funding. So yeah, that's how we're gonna hear that more often here. So thank you for the support and please support us. Now let's talk about AI for virtual worlds, David. I think people are excited to hear about this one. Let us know in the comments if you've got any strong opinions in this area. Also, make it a nuanced breakdown if you can, so that we can understand exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so always interesting to see people's strong views on AI. It's certainly one of the most controversial topics in the tech industry at the moment, as well as obviously being the fastest moving by far, one of the fastest moving technologies in history. So we have two stories here. One is relatively minor, and we'll cover it quickly, and the other is very major, and we will get into a lot of detail on it. So, firstly, if I can find it here, yes, Horizon Worlds desktop editor, the Windows application that you use to build Horizon Worlds, now has an AI agent called Creator Assistant, and it can be used to automate development tasks. So we've been talking all year about how Horizon Worlds has gotten these AI features to generate models and textures, skyboxes, sound effects, ambient audio. But in these cases, you're generating an asset and then you're placing it in the world. You can AI generate some scripts, as you can do with any LLM, right? Get it to write the scripts for you, but it may not always have the full context of the APIs in Horizon Worlds and things like that. And that's we've been talking about this as like AI assisted development, but essentially you're telling it what to generate, and then you're doing all the placement in the world and kind of being the actual developer. It's just as if you're kind of passing off, as if an artist has passed off something to you and you're kind of still doing the development. Well, this Creator Assistant goes a step further, and it's you'll be hearing this term AI agent a lot this year if you haven't already, in that it takes agentic steps, right? It actually performs tasks within the editor. So you see in this example here, you say, generate a trampoline that looks like an inflatable box. It should launch the player upwards by a certain force and angle, position it behind the starting pad. So the AI then goes into the asset library, finds a 3D model that matches the description, places it behind the starting pad, right, where it was told to go here, and writes a script, attaches the script to it, and obviously all of this is done in the editor in front of you. It's like someone has kind of come over to your computer and kind of taken the mouse and keyboard and started doing this for you. Or you could analogize it to like working with a junior developer. If you're a manager, it's like telling them what to do and they perform it. So you can think, another example Meta gives here is to say, you could say, Creator Assistant, make a door that opens when a button is pressed. So the Creator Assistant will then find a door and button 3D model in the asset library, place them in the world, set their properties and rotations, all of those things you might do in Unity or any other editor, and write and attach TypeScript to make the button open the door. Meta is the first to ship this as like a very heavily integrated feature in their editor, but you can do this with things like Unity and Roblox by using like a third-party tool and something called MCP, which standardizes how AI agents can talk to editors. This is something that we expect to roll out across most game engines over the next few years. I don't think this is going to be unique to Meta. I think this is going to be something that is quite widespread, but you see Meta kind of pushing it as a heavily integrated feature here first. Ironically, a limitation is that according to Meta's documentation, at least, I plan to try this out quite soon, you can't it doesn't actually use the AI generation features. That's a deeply ironic thing. So when you tell it to do something, it goes and finds an existing 3D asset. I imagine that's probably a temporary limitation that they will solve soon.
Hmm. Very interesting, and I appreciate Mr. Mycelium's comment. I'm always skeptical of AI, but this feels like one step closer to a holodeck, provided that it actually works. It's just a shame it's in Horizon Worlds, though. Yeah, you're speaking my language there, bringing up the holodeck. The holodeck remains my model. I've joked with people in the past about how let's bring it back to where I am exactly today. I have a holodeck in my house. It's in a PC. It runs a 2080 graphics card, and I just don't turn it on very often, right? I don't access what that holodeck can take me to very often. But as of, I don't know, a week ago, that holodeck runs an Ethernet cord out to all three of the VR spaces where I might want to go into a headset. And I can run that Ethernet up into my Apple Vision Pro. I can run that Ethernet up into my Quest. I can have a wired internet connection to that holodeck that is sitting in my room over there on that 2080 PC. And here we are, where I want to go to the holodeck and ask for a room that meets a specific set of specifications. And that's what everyone wants, right? We all want that. How well does it achieve it? How much can you mold it? A lot of this stuff, David. Do we have one more here? Yeah, world models. I'm really curious about language like handmade with AI. Like, have you ever seen anyone use that sort of language to describe what they're building with this sort of prompting? Does anyone try to take credit for prompting an AI to build something artistic? Are we at that level with this?
It's an interesting question. I mean, it comes down to how you credit things in general, right? Like a lot of the time, we talk about someone being behind a video game, right? Like the Death Stranding, for example. But they are the head of the studio, right? Like, or you say Todd Howard was behind Skyrim, but he didn't write the code. He didn't make the models. Other people did. Bethesda did, right? So you talk about a team of people today, and we already have human beings taking credit for what human beings do. So I guess you could say that you could argue that, you know, the studio lead of a studio that is entirely just AI agents, you could say they would take credit in the same sense. I don't see that there's a massive distinction there, other than that obviously it needs to be pointed out. I don't think it would be ethical to not tell people. You do want to note that consumers have the right to have as much knowledge about things like that as possible. But, you know, again, I do think we're in an interesting world where we often credit the heads of companies with things that I'm not saying they don't do anything important. Of course they do. They do a very important job, and they what's the kind of quote from that Steve Jobs movie? I conduct the orchestra, right? You're the
Mm.
best player. You sit right there in the front seat, but I conduct the orchestra. The conductor's not playing the instruments, but he can. This is conducting the orchestra, right?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting analogy. And I think what David just described was, right, the conductors are learning their skills, they're building their teams, and they're not comfortable in talking about that they're a conductor yet, right? They're not good enough at the task. And then, honestly, the tools are still getting better left and right for them to kind of feel confident in calling themselves an AI conductor or an AI team production conductor. But what we're zooming in on here, right, is there does come a time where, I don't know, you ask the AI for a scene, and then you walk around the scene and slowly just mold it into your vision, right? Like, that's the insanity of this argument that is so I don't know. Like, everyone is used to this experience. Anyone that's messed with an AI agent or an AI tool at this point is used to the casino feeling of putting the prompt in and kind of pulling the lever and seeing what the system spits out, and feeling like you're just doing that over and over and over again, right? Like, you're used to that. But that's not how it will always be. These tools will slowly get better, and it will, like, that whole pipeline of having to redo it from scratch again, that won't always be. There will be
Yeah,
better tools to kind of like, oh, this is all great, but I need to switch this one part of everything you've built for me, or I need to switch this room, keep everything as it is except for this room, right? Like, there's no, all that logic is not built into these systems yet, but it's coming, and so many people know that it's coming, and we will get there where like it's
Yeah.
not going to sound too different to describe, like. Anyways, David, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, look, when it comes to this, you can already tweak it, right? So all this does is interact with the editor in a way you could do. It doesn't do anything you couldn't. So say you don't like where it placed this trampoline, you just click on it and move it with your regular tools, right? Say you don't like how much it launches the player up. You go into that code file and tweak the value, right? Whatever it happens to be, a float or whatever. You could even, if you don't know what that is, you just go into the code file and ask the AI in the context of that code file, change the force up. It's not like an image or a video generator where you have to regenerate it. You do have better steerability here. But I think that brings us very well on to our biggest AI topic. This was something we just wanted to touch on. I see a commenter pointing out here, who was it here? That Unity actually does have something similar now. I didn't see that they'd shipped it yet, but it looks like they have. I think it's called, let me bring it up here, find the comment.
Yeah, someone mentioned in the comments. I can't remember what it was called.
Sorry, it's Unity Muse, but they are replacing it now with something called Unity AI. It seems like it's still not fully shipped in the full sense, but certainly interesting. As I said before, it's going to be in all these editors, whether it's there now in beta or next year or a month from now. It's going to be in every game engine. Of course it is. It's going to be part of the future of game development. And you don't have to use it, right? Nobody's forcing you to use any of this. There's nothing that this AI can do that you can't do yourself. It's just a new option for people who want to do things. And maybe you do 90% of the work and you get this to do the 10% that you don't like. Maybe you like 90% of game development and hate 10%. Well, you get the AI to do that 10%. I think, I heard some 3D artists talking about how they don't want to generate 3D assets, but, it'd be pretty cool if an AI could do the UVs. If they, there are tedious parts of work that even people who may not be fully on board with the idea of AI are into yet.
Well, let me just push back on that idea. Like, it's a really interesting idea, but if you're not an expert at the thing that you're asking the AI to do, you also may not be able to discern between what makes really good version of that and what is sloppy slop coming. What your artistic eye may not be tuned in the way that people who actually are artists in that other thing that you're just not interested in doing are. So I just want to push back and say that I respect all the artists out there who, like, what you said was not wrong, but like it's such a complicated thing out there for people to argue of like, someone just took my job, but they're putting out slop in the place of what a human just produced. And that is happening, but it's all, this other thing is going to happen too, isn't it, David? Where you're going to have people using these tools to just do the tasks they don't want to do. But if you're doing that too often, maybe you missed some piece of I don't know, artistry that you should have had. Yeah, anyway, sorry. I wanted to say that. I felt.
No, I get what you're saying. I completely get what you're saying, but there are parts of every creative outlet that are not like part of even the creativity. They're kind of just like the boilerplate aspect, right? I don't think any artist likes UV mapping. If you are a 3D artist and you like UV mapping, please let us know in the comments. If you don't, let us know as well. I see, Mr. Mycelium saying, I hate writing boilerplate code. A good analogy here is, like, say you had a home robot. Maybe you love cooking, so you do all the cooking and you get it to do the washing up. Or maybe you love cooking, but you like hate a certain dicing or slicing of something, and you get it to do that and help you out with just, I'm not talking about the entire task, just the little bits you don't like, and do that.
You nailed it, David. That's a wonderful example. And I'm going to go down a whole rabbit hole here, but like, cooking is amazing. It's amazing to cook if you don't have to go and measure out every single item from your pantry right before. If every single item is already in the container sitting out at the right measurement, it's actually kind of fun to go, oh, I'm going to dump this into this, into this, into this. I'm going to take this and put it in this. But actually, it turns out that a lot of the skill of cooking is in balancing three plates, all cooking identically at the same. Like you've got this one going in here, this one going in here, and you're saving the time that this one is in steam mode by doing this task over here. And you end up with a game of Overcooked really, really quickly, because that is the skill of cooking, is managing three things all at once.
Yeah.
But when it turns out it's actually newbies who want to learn cooking, this is how they learn, right? And making them go and read a book where, oh, I've got to have three measuring cups here. I only have one measuring cup in this kitchen, and I need three measuring cups for salt, sugar, and you haven't trained in all the steps of how to do one step after another, how to, anyways, I love the idea of mixed reality making all of this trivial for us, right? Like let us have more time with the fun stuff. And like there's so many people arguing, wait, no, AI is taking all the fun stuff away from me. And I don't necessarily believe that's the right argument.
Yeah, I mean, there obviously are going to be market forces that make it, like, for some people it will take away from them, right? But for a lot of other people, as we're saying here, it will let them focus on what they enjoy and have it do what they don't, right? No, I feel for anyone who would ever be forced to use AI. I would hope that the creators we're talking about here have the choice, and they always have the choice. Interesting comment from Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, who says, personally, AI hasn't been helpful for coding, probably because I'm not using Python or whatever academia uses. It sucks and needs more work to oversee and correct. So that's a totally valid perspective. The one issue I do have with your comment is that you say AI. What model? The thing about the pace of progress of AI is you could be talking about GPT 4.0, which is 2 years old and I think like a quarter as good as the current models, and I think was replaced today, right, while we were on this live stream. Or you could be talking about O3 or Grok 4 or Gemini 2.5 Pro, the state of the art. The difference in 6 months is like, I need you to be specific. It would be great to know. I'm not taking away your perspective. You could be totally right. I just think it's very important. If you're going to give a opinion of AI in our comments, please specify what model you're talking about. Because the analogy I made earlier is, it would be like, it's a possibility that you could often almost as if be talking about Oculus Go when you say, I don't like VR. You ever meet someone who said, I tried VR and I didn't like it. And then you say, what did you try? And it was like, that Samsung one for your phone. And you're like, no, you got to try a Quest 3 or a Valve Index or a Big Screen Beyond. That's the kind of difference we're talking about here. Yeah. Okay. So let's get into our final topic, though, which is much, much further than the kind of AI we're talking about here. It is something that is one of the most impressive pieces of research I've ever seen presented. It opens up fundamental questions about the future of rendering, of virtual reality, of video games, of interactive media. And this is Google DeepMind's Genie 3 research. So the virtual reality of science fiction that you often see in the movies and TV shows of decades involves someone putting on a headset or connecting to a neural interface and often going into a virtual world that looks and feels and behaves entirely real, right? Think of, I don't want to spoil a certain series, but okay, there is a series that recently came out where people do put on this headset and instantly they're in a world that looks entirely real. I contrast that to where we are today, right? On a high-end VR system like PlayStation VR 2 or PC VR, you can get pretty realistic graphics, but it's still not real. And that's kind of ties into the tiramisu thing about, even when we get the hardware for everything to look real, when does the software become the limit? When, even on a 5090 and Unreal Engine 5, does it not look quite real? And of course, even if we do imagine PC VR advancing 5, 10, 15 years and getting to true photorealism, where it literally looks like you're in the real world, those virtual worlds are going to cost millions of dollars to build, hundreds of thousands even for the most efficient teams, right? Millions of dollars to build, take years of development. Even if you do add some of these AI assistant tools in, it's still going to require, the conductor, right? The person to put these things all together in the right way, to kind of build the story. And that's only graphics, okay? What about physics? that's one of the things that is kind of stagnated in gaming, right? Some games focus really hard on putting one really realistic aspect of physics in, and the developers spend months or years on doing it. Far Cry 2 had its fire physics, and Battlefield 6 coming out now has its destruction, and some other games have like fluid physics. Some others, have interesting cloth physics, but it's never like all of physics. It's not like you have the freedom to do whatever you want in a true sandbox where everything will react as if real. It's not like I can take a brick off an average wall and put it back together and, mix chemicals. And it would be impossible for a team of human developers to model all of physics and give you a true, realistic, photorealistic, interactive environment. And obviously, I'm talking about high-end VR. Let's think about mainstream standalone VR like Quest headsets. It has graphics that in the best case looks like early PS4, in average late stage PS2, right? Meta and Qualcomm, with each Quest generation every 3 years or so, double the GPU power. That's impressive, right? I'm not taking away from Qualcomm's engineers, but that's going to take decades to get to even the PC VR of today, never mind of tomorrow, and never mind photorealism. And yes, we're going to have eye-tracked foveated rendering and neural upscaling that will help with these things, but they're band-aids. They're not fundamentally going to get you to a standalone mobile chip headset with photorealism. Think of how far away your Quest is today from that, and even your PC. Let's be real. Half-Life Alyx looks amazing. It does not look real. Of course it doesn't. It doesn't feel real either. So you can obviously then. Sorry, were you saying something?
Oh no, I was looking at comments. I want to talk about some of the comments out there,
Sure.
But keep going.
Well, let's. I mean, I'm only in the introduction. Let's get into. I haven't even brought up the model yet, right? So there are other techniques to get to photorealism in gaming, like in VR, like Gaussian splatting, like photogrammetry. But these techniques essentially represent like one moment in time. You can get moving splats these days, but you've got a lot of data in there. It requires original captures. Doing this in a truly interactive way, in the same way that we have animations in video games, will require either some crazy breakthroughs or traditional rendering, which gets you straight back to square one. And of course, that has to be captured in the first place, right? You have to go out and take all the photos to generate your Gaussian splat. You could theoretically render something in Blender and then take virtual photos, but you're still having to build it in the first place, right? So what if there is a completely different way to achieve interactive virtual worlds? A stranger way that has its own issues that we'll get into, but that has the possibility to be a real viable path to truly photorealistic and interactive realistic, whatever the word would be for that, virtual reality. Well, yesterday, Google DeepMind revealed Genie 3, 2 days ago now, an AI model that generates real-time interactive video stream from a text prompt. It's essentially a near photorealistic video game, but where each frame is entirely AI generated. There is no traditional rendering or image input involved at all. This is not upscaling. This is not doing something with a game engine. There is nothing traditional happening here. Google calls Genie 3 a world model, but it could also just be called an interactive video model. The initial input is a text prompt. The real-time input is mouse and keyboard, right? WASD and mouse look. And the output is a video stream. So we will get into the limitations of Genie 3 in a second, but what I think is remarkable about Genie as a model of a series of models is the pace of progress. And that's why this is so interesting. So the original Genie in early 2024, last year, less than 18 months ago, was primarily focused on generating 2D side scrollers at 256 by 256 resolution. Worse, it could only run for a few dozen frames before the world would lose coherence. So the sample clips are only a few seconds. So Genie 1, February 2024, 256p side scrollers that last for 1 or 2 seconds. Then in December, Genie 2 arrived. And it stunned the AI industry. And I noticed this at the time. I didn't think of reporting it yet because I didn't know, like, what is the pace of progress? Is this a one-off? Is this a path that's going to work? But they achieved a model for 3D graphics. So you could have first-person or third-person control, mouse look and WASD or arrow keys, right? It output at 360p, 15 frames per second and could run for 10 or 20 seconds before the world would lose coherence. So it works for 10 or 20 seconds, 360p, 20 or 15 frames per second. But its output was also blurry and low detail. It had that distinctly AI generated look that you might recognize from the older video generation models of years ago, or the image generation models of like 5 or 6 years ago, right? The primitive ones. Genie 3 arrived this week, and it's a significant leap forward. It outputs these highly realistic graphics at 720p, 24 FPS. The environments stay fully consistent for 1 minute and largely consistent for several minutes. So you get a couple of minutes. So look, if you're still not quite sure what Genie 3 does in practice here, let's be very clear. You type a description of a virtual world you want, and within a second, it appears on your screen, navigable through standard keyboard and mouse movement controls. And these virtual worlds are not static. Doors will open when you approach them. Dynamic shadows will exist on moving objects. You can see physics interactions like splashes and ripples in water as objects disturb it. But the most fascinating aspect of Genie 3 is that these physics behaviors are emergent from the underlying model of the world that is developed during training. Without any human pre-programming, Google programmers did not implement dynamic shadows or water splashes, and none of this occurred. This is all learned. These are things that, as I said, human developers spend months or years to build. So this is why Google calls it a world model, because it turns out to make an interactive video, as in something where you see a video stream, you press arrow keys to move around it, and you move a mouse around, the AI model during training does learn a model of the world. And then you can add other interactions in the prompt. You can have promptable world events. So you just type, a giraffe walks up from the left to the right of the screen, a bouncing ball appears, a dragon flies in from the sky. You can change the weather and things like this. So, let's be clear. There are two reactions from people here that I see. One group is the AI hype bros that tell you, "Oh, bro, traditional rendering is gone. This is it. We've replaced it now. There's no more game engines. GTA 6 should be cancelled and replaced with AI." That's the one camp. To be clear, these are the extreme camps.
That was a crazy voice impression. I just want to give you kudos for that. That was creepy. All right, good job.
I'm almost finished here. The other camp is kind of saying, "Oh, well, this is pointless. It lasts for a couple of minutes. I want to play games for hours, and it's 720p and 24 FPS. It doesn't do multiplayer. Like, this is useless." And I think, obviously, these are the extreme camps, and both are deeply wrong, right? So this is still the early days of world models. It is important to note that these limitations exist, and I'll talk about more limitations after Ian gives some of his thoughts here. But at the same time, the pace of progress here is astonishing. We've gone from 256p 2D side scrollers that run for 2 seconds to multiple minute 720p near photorealistic virtual worlds in less than 18 months. So the pace of progress here is astonishing. We've talked about this dream of the holodeck, right? And we talk about that in the context of the previous story where you're kind of talking about how to place 3D models and textures and, it's all running in a game engine. This is like the true form of the holodeck, where you speak a sentence of the virtual world you want, and instantly you're in a photorealistic version of it with full physics simulation. We'll get into the limitations. It's not perfect, but think of what Genie 10 will be. Think of what Genie even 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 will be. The people can have valid criticisms of AI, of course, from ethical perspectives that they can, of course, hold. But if your problem with AI is, "Oh, it's not good enough," where have you been for the past 2 years? Look at the progress in every field. Go and Google what Midjourney 1 looked like compared to the Midjourney of today. Image generators, right? Where it was a blurry, horrible mess that didn't match the prompt at all. And now today it's photorealistic imagery. Look at Google's VO3 and look what video generation used to be. You remember the cursed video of Will Smith eating the spaghetti that was only like a year ago. Think of the timelines we talk about for hardware and VR. Think of the timelines for, all of the technologies that have taken decades to develop. These kind of generative AI technologies are developing on the scale of months. And I will come out of this and read about GPT-5 that's just come out and all of what it can do. But yeah, this stuff from Google DeepMind, obviously go watch the videos. We've put some of the most interesting ones into our article so you can see examples of interactivity. For example, there was one where you have a paint roller, and by pressing the arrow key forward, when it touches the wall, the paint roller will now leave paint on the wall. When you go sideways, it will exactly realistically have the paint along the wall. And if you go up and down with your mouse, it'll paint the wall. Like this, none of this is pre-programmed. Like this is raw. This is keyboard controls to pixels. There's no game engine here. Like this is astonishing. And if you just imagine where this is going to be in 10 years from now.
Thank you to those who have tuned into this podcast live to watch us while Skynet is launching GPT-5 news over with OpenAI, parallel to our live recording. If you didn't watch us live, you ended up watching us or listening to us on a pre-recorded podcast. Thank you for listening to us over there. I love LL, who's been watching us out there instead of, they're putting off the GPT-5 news. It's moments like this and technologies like this that reinforce to David and I that we're in the roles we should be, reporting on what we should be reporting on. And we're not crazy when we tell people that headsets are the future of personal computing. This stuff is mind-blowing to degrees that we can barely wrap our heads around. And when companies like Apple use the term spatial computing and Meta uses the term metaverse such that they brand their entire company behind it, and we as like hurt people who have been in this industry for more than a decade, like watching executives flail at ideas or just not support it the way we would support it necessarily. And then something like this drops, and it's like, oh, wait a second. Did Meta just have its launch handed to it, right? Like, did Google just show that they're actually ready to provide the actual tools that people need to build worlds in 2 to 3 years? Like, it's hard to be on this journey of like, I don't know. We've been pulled and we've been pushed and pulled by companies like Google investing in different technologies left and right. But when we see things like the proxy research I talked about earlier, and then we see this research dropped within a day or so of the proxy research, I see the pieces of a platform that is potentially better than Apple's platform, built by Google and ready to ship. If they can get their act together, they're
you just muted.
They're ready in a real way to answer what Apple has done. And we're all now looking to Meta going, Meta, are you really, what this does is it moves the bar forward so much to whatever tool Meta shows off next. Is it as performant as this? Is it really as good as this, or are they trying to trick us with something that isn't quite as performant? It's a big deal.
Yeah, I think Google's core tech, when it comes to AI, is kind of second to none. Of course, you have certain AI labs like OpenAI and XAI, jumping a little bit past Gemini sometimes, and they play this game of kind of chasing past each other. But when you go to things other than just like LLMs, Google DeepMind is just blowing things away, right? They won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for AlphaFold. They are the same lab that did AlphaGo, that shocked the world by learning a game that AI experts thought would take decades or centuries for AI to ever understand. They are some of the people who pioneered reinforcement learning. And we forget that like transformers were invented at Google Brain, which is now merged into DeepMind. DeepMind, if you're not aware, it's actually an English company that Google acquired like more than 10 years ago now, run by Demis Hassabis, who's one of the kind of AI experts of the world, is someone I've been following for a very long time. And it's been fascinating to see this all kind of come together over time. And I think if you look at what Google paid for DeepMind back then, like one of the smartest investments of all time. You can say that Facebook acquiring Oculus was a good idea from Mark Zuckerberg's perspective. Of course, you can disagree about whether it's good for the industry, but if you are Mark Zuckerberg wanting a part of the future, it's a good decision. For $2 billion, $3 billion, that's nothing compared to like Microsoft bought Activision for like $70 billion, right? what Google got DeepMind for is a steal compared to what they're getting out of it. There are certain areas of AI research that nobody else is pushing in the way that DeepMind is, and I think as AI becomes so important to VR and mixed reality, that's going to become a huge advantage for Google, as you say, Ian, when it comes to Android XR, right? There, a few years ago, before kind of AI was as obviously, a key part of the future of most of technology, there were a lot of people that were arguing, like, is Meta investing too much in AI versus VR, AR? And I think even at the time, both of us on this podcast and many in the industry were saying to people saying that, no, you don't get it. These are the same thing. Like, it is AI is going to be as crucial to VR and AR as the displays and tracking. It is like fundamental. It is a fundamental element of the future of VR. And this is an example of the research that shows that. And yeah, I'm actually, one of the things I'm most interested in seeing in Android XR is how Google leverages DeepMind and some of its technologies. And I want to be clear, look, there are a lot of roadblocks to get something like this in your VR headset. We're not suggesting this is going to happen this year. Absolutely not. Or even next year. We are talking about many years until this happens. But once you can do it, it's going to be like, trying a headset for the first time. It's going to be a moment of technology that blows us away. Like being able to speak a sentence and have a custom photorealistic virtual world conjured in front of you is going to be incredible. But there are a ton of issues to ever getting there. And just before we get into this, Ian, I just want to point out one huge issue with AI that you brought up that is going to mean that traditional rendering isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and that is steerability. So I think you brought this up in the last conversation, but we should bring it up here. What you imagine in your mind when you type or speak your prompt versus what you get will often be quite different. And if you want to make something look precisely like how you want it to look, that's not always going to be possible. And in fact, it's going to be a long time before that's possible. So look, when it comes to a traditional video game, every pixel, every texture, every model was crafted by a human programmer or artist. You're seeing exactly what they want you to see, often through years of refinement. With AI, the analogy I made in my article was that it's more like a hyperdimensional coordinate than a truly understood command. You're accessing an area of latent space shaped by patterns in the training data. And so it will never match exactly what an artist had in mind. Once you get to promptable world events, that'll be tougher. There are a bunch of other minor issues with getting this into VR, like how you would get it to adapt to body tracking and hand tracking and head poses. These would all have to be, new parameters and inputs. Meta is going to be doing research on this too. I would be surprised if we don't see, but it's going to be years.
All right, let me show this image here. I did this test yesterday. This was the Tokyo course that Meta just announced, Mighty Coconut just announced for Walkabout Mini Golf, coming very soon. And I took this image, still image, that Walkabout announced with the new course where they were confirming it publicly. I took that image, I fed it into Google's, was it VO3, I think it was, and asked it for a photorealistic rendition of this. It added reflections to the windows. It made this go-kart move down the street. It added headlights to the go-kart that were projected onto the street. It added cars that were moving on the street up there in the corner. And yeah, moving believable reflections as this camera moved for a few seconds down this scene, this whole thing. All of it invented by Google's system based on a still image for an unreleased virtual world in which every item in that virtual world is placed by hand, by human, selected for its placement and how its overall vibe will make you feel. Closing the gap between this hand-placed location and what David just showed in his previous images, this photorealistic navigable space, is going to be the subject of the next 10 years of our podcast, right? We're going to return to this again and again and again and unlock different ways of doing it at more, more, better, faster in every single respect, right? All the things that David has brought down for us to think about, things like steerability, right? The way this is done today is a bunch of very skilled artists go into Gravity Sketch and then pass the work around between their teams as different experts in different classes of art add their little take on the space. And at the end of it, you arrive with the magic that is Walkabout Mini Golf, which plenty of, I don't know, shooter people out there who love the graphical intensity of Call of Duty expect to see inside of this laid back mini golf game. Right? It's not that, but it is hand placed. And so I'm going to go full circle now back to AI and the team thing that we see in the audience. This space is moving so fast and the tools are shifting so fast. I don't see groups of 5 different artists who are each skilled in a different class of art getting together quickly enough and saying, okay, we've actually got a budget of $5 million. We've got every AI tool imaginable. I'm an expert in level design. You're an expert in 3D modeling. This is an expert in lighting. Let's produce the best game imaginable using AI tools to extend our reach. What does that look like? How different is it? Even if these examples exist, the people who are doing it are scared in some respects to admit to the tools that they're using to make those things because it could deny them sales when they launch. David, have I said anything crazy here? Does it make sense what I'm talking about? I was blown away by that still to video thing that I stuck into Google's system that I just needed to talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I don't think what you're saying is crazy at all. So, you're talking about taking a still and putting it into VO, the video model. My understanding of how Genie works is that you could, to answer a commenter here, Genie is not publicly available. You can see a bunch of DeepMind people, Google DeepMind people on X posting demos with it where you can see their keyboard input. So it is real. You can see it, that it's really working, but it's not available. But you could theoretically have put that Walkabout Mini Golf screenshot into Genie 3 if you had access and then start driving the cart around that street and have an entire virtual world generated. So that's the kind of insanity of Genie 3. But I think what you said about the AI tools thing is valid. And a lot of people have said this. It's become almost like a cliche. I'm not sure who said it first, but a lot of people are concerned that an AI is going to take their job. And it seems far more likely that at least in the medium and short term, it will be a person using an AI that will take your job if you are adamantly refusing to do it. And I'm just reporting a sentiment that many people in the industry give. So there will, of course, be a stage at which AI agents are able to replace human beings, but I see that being a long way off. And like human taste is still a quality that I don't think these models quite get. So I see that creators and developers are going to become more like managers of a high IQ team of interns that are very, very smart but don't have much real taste or knowledge of the world or understanding of what's right yet, and you direct them. And so, yeah, it's much more likely that, like, if you're adamantly against AI and worried about being replaced, I don't think it will be an agent. I think it will be someone that's using agents.
It's really, really complicated to think of all the skills out there. It's actually really remarkable. Like, right, everything. So many opinions that I see shared in our comments are part of what's happening. This is a social mega trend that is really once in a century, once in every couple centuries. Like, that's how big David and I believe the shift from VR is. And AI is a major, major part of that overall shift. And so go back a few minutes to like some of the big thoughts we were having. What happens when you and 5 friends you have never actually met can all get together and shape a world together with words? And the system, you trust the system to work out the disagreements between your various prompts. and you learn how to work with others by literally prompting the environment around you. It's feasible, it's within reach, and if it's upsetting or like hard for you to grasp, that's because of how new it is, right? Earlier in this show, I described Command and Conquer, right? Taking a mouse click and dragging it over a bunch of units on a flat screen. And here we are in the day in 2025, and those units have popped off of the screen and they can actually be in physical space around you. And we have all the radio technologies for controlling them that we need. And now all we need to do is use space around us for commanding these things. It's tragic in a way to watch like all of our skills that we honed with mouse and keyboard suddenly, quite literally, what Scotty said in Star Trek 4, quaint, right? All these skills that I spent so many hours learning how to type at 80 words per minute, and now actually the more important skill is to speak your sentence clearly the first time you say it, right?
Yeah.
Like that skill is quaint.
And it's a continuation of a trend, right? When you made a video game in the 90s, almost all the time you built an engine, right? You built an engine and that was part of the game and it wasn't even thought of as a separate thing. Now you use a game engine, then over time, you use maybe like some Unity assets or use a higher level engine that does more things underlying for you. You're not writing, your own lighting and rendering code. This is a trend that has been happening for decades and you just get higher and higher level. And the advantage of that is that you get to focus on the actual high level creativity of what kind of world do you want to build? What kind of virtual world do you want to build? Not do you want to spend time messing with, UV wrapping and light mapping parameters? What kind of world do you want to build? What do you want to happen in that world? What story takes place? Or what game mechanics? And of course, there are disadvantages there too. You have less control over the specifics, just like when you use a game engine, you have less control over the specifics of how the core technology like lighting and rendering works. You have to kind of play within what it allows. But that's the kind of trade-off there. And ideally, you get both, right? You get an AI system that can generate the starters and then the ability to use traditional tools to tweak things down to what you exactly want. Same thing with image editing, right? You generate what you want and then you can go into Photoshop and tweak it however you want afterwards. But yeah, very, very interesting feature here. I think we've had such an interesting discussion today. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. If you have anything else to say, I think that's all.
I think it's probably a good time to say we believe in artists. We adore their work. We want to see more artists working in this space. We spend a large amount of our time. Contact Henry Stockdale or Don Hopper if you have art in this space, a new game. We have people here for you to talk to tell about what you're doing. We don't have, we have to decide what we have time to cover. So, reach out to us again if we don't get to what you're working on. But it's really important to us to highlight artists out there, the decisions that they're making, why they're making those decisions. The decision to use AI or not is a human one at the end of the day. And there's a lot of artists out there grappling with those decisions. And it's, we're going to report all those views as we get to it over time. And these tools are proliferating. It's going to be an ongoing area of coverage. Thank you for covering this so carefully, David. Do want you to travel well. So hopefully we can eventually order business class tickets for my staff who are flying. I'm glad you've got your Vision Pro in your head. You're going to be flying better than everyone else in that flight. But we want to get back to our homes where we've got cozy little VR dens. And actually traveling to a VR headset is one of the only reasons we will ever really be pulled out of our VR den, unless it's for, purely just exploratory reasons because we want to do something for fun. So that's who we are, right? We love this technology through and through and the escape it gives us at any time. Right, David? I've never talked to you about why you believe in VR, but I'm guessing that it's very similar to me. It's an escape anytime you need it. And gosh, a lot of people are going to need that over the course of this century. Yeah, I think you should become a member at UploadVR.com, support our work so that David can get a business class ticket, please.
I don't think we would
see you later.
Let's
No,
be
I
clear.
want the business class
I'm
ticket for you.
Gears
I'm not flying
economy.
business class,
I'll
to be
be in
clear.
economy.
We don't fly business class, but he needs to. All right, I insist.
I'll be fine. It is the irony, though, of VR, of course, isn't it, that we are kind of defying distance and not having to do physical travel, except to try new hardware, of course, because
Yes,
you
that's
can't.
literally you've
Yeah,
pulled David out of his VR den to go see a future VR headset, a time machine. Let's make it be an okay trip so he doesn't get sick and have to go to sleep for 6 days because he's sick. All right, it's happened before. All right, we'll see you.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in the future.